Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the new moon in the first decan of Leo. I am joined here today by my good friend Janet Goodspeed. How are you doing today, Janet?
Oh, I'm great. I'm
Yeah,
very warm.
is it hot where you're at as well?
It's hot. It's probably going to be the hottest day of the year.
Oh, jeez. That reminds me, that's the one thing that I did forget to do is bring the fan into my room today. But I think I did on purpose so that I could have like the experience of the pressure cooker that we're going to be experiencing with this Leo new moon potentially. Um, so, thank you for all of you for joining us here today. If you are new to the experience here, please let us know where you're stopping in from. We have friends joining us from all around the world. It's always nice to see where you're coming from, to hear your words of encouragement and your contributions in the chat here as well. If you are old friends, it's nice to see all of you as well. I'm going to give a few people some shout outs here, Janet. We've got Manuela from Spain, who recently moved to Spain. Place of Stillness is joining us. Previously, I believe, was in Sweden, but correct me if I'm wrong. Rachel is here from Ireland. Hello, Rachel. Lynn is joining us from Vermont. Raven is stopping in from Kansas. I love this. This is one of my favorite things, is having this international crowd here stopping in. And Janet, you're an international friend to the show as well, correct?
I sure am. I am up in Canada. I'm actually originally from really close to where you live. I'm originally from the North Shore of Lake Ontario. So if you hear my Ontarian accent, that's why. I do
Nice.
not have a non-regional accent. I have a very regional accent. I
What
say
city?
pasta.
What city in Ontario?
I was born in Belleville.
Okay, cool, cool.
Yeah.
I have cousins in Sarnia. I don't know if that's anywhere close to that, but
Oh, it's in there.
yeah.
It's close. It's all close.
I consider myself maybe an honorary Canadian sometimes because my grandma was born in Canada, and I don't know if that counts for anything, but I've always
I mean, my grandparents are from the UK, so technically I could get a UK passport. So I think it
nice.
counts a little bit.
Excellent. Well, Janet, I've been really impressed by your work, your social media channels, the craftsmanship that you do. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do. You're a jewelry maker inspired by metaphysics and the tarot.
Yeah. So I originally got into tarot and astrology when I was about 16. Um, and I, spent my entire teenagehood in like a very small area of Calgary, Alberta, where I would go to punk shows at this like cool venue. And then I would also go to this gigantic public library and get out all of the books on tarot and astrology that I could.
Nice.
Um, and, life happens. You do a bunch of weird stuff. You go to art school, you drop out, you move to a different place. And then all through that time, reading tarot for friends, reading tarot for strangers, reading tarot like professionally. And then I ended up in art school again, the second time. And I was in a sculpture class with a Swiss trained goldsmith. And
Wow.
she inspired me to just totally change my trajectory and go to jewelry school.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then that was my goal, was to just incorporate metaphysical stuff into jewelry. They're obviously like a very good pair. And, I got a little bit sidetracked with some reality stuff, Saturn return. And
Sure.
then I kind of got back on track recently. So now I'm actually doing a whole 22 major arcana collection of tarot card pendants.
Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. And you've been doing some astrological study as well, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I, like I said, I've been into astrology for a long, long time, but only recently, like most people, I discovered traditional astrology, and that system really called me in a way that I had never really like things started to click. It was like the
Yes.
moment
Oh
the
yeah.
galaxy brain moment, if you will, where I was like, this makes sense to me. And so I've been just nose diving into it. Am I allowed to swear on
Oh
this?
yeah, go ahead, sure. Yeah. We just be
Mars
whatever
is
version
present
of
in the
yourself.
chat today. Let's
Yeah,
just say that.
whatever version of yourself you want to be today. It's
So
all
I've been
good.
fucking going for it.
Sure. Yeah.
I've been astrologizing.
Yeah. And so you've been working, you said you were working with Kelly Surtees, correct?
Yes, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
doing Kelly's program class by class, and it's really great. I mean, we love
Very cool.
Kelly. And
Oh
I,
yeah.
I
Kelly's great.
love an Australian accent so
Right.
much. We love it.
Yeah, and you were saying that you've gone down the astrology podcast journey as so many of us have when we got introduced to traditional astrology, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I have had dreams about Chris Brennan. So I am officially initiated into the mystery school of
Sure.
TAP.
Yeah, and you know, I really love what you were saying about things kind of clicking into place. That was the experience I had when my journey started with Demetra George, where I received her
Mm,
book Astrology and the Authentic Self, which was kind of the gateway book between modern and traditional astrology. And
yeah.
that's when the light bulb was like, oh my goodness, this is something completely different, right? So yeah, it's super fun to see that people go through that journey, that awakening, and we try to help promote that here on this channel as well. So Janet, you're doing talismanic jewelry. Well, sort of. You're doing tarot-inspired jewelry. Sorry, I don't want to misquote. They're sort of like talismans, though, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah, I say jewelry is magic, right?
yeah,
Like even if you work in the jewelry industry and you have nothing to do with astrological talismans or amulets or anything, jewelry is about story. It's about telling a story. It's about communicating meaning. It's about finding value in the passing on of heirlooms. Like it's a historically important thing, right? Like historically, you would pass your wealth through jewelry, like dowries for brides. I mean, that's problematic, but in our modern life. But yeah, jewelry is just a place where you can find so much meaning. And so I find it's really cool to bring tarot into that because naturally those pieces just become imbued with that intention, right? And
yeah,
silver being the metal of the moon, it really can translate for people, right? Like once people start wearing the pieces that I make, they find their own experiences with it. It's really cool to hear
nice.
feedback from people about that.
Well, and do you share your chart placements or some of your chart placements?
Yeah.
Okay, so silver is probably a pretty special metal for you as well, right? With your rising.
Yes. Yeah. I'm a Cancer rising, Cancer moon. So
Yeah,
silver is like the thing.
and you have a Leo.
It's actually just so funny that I ended up being a silversmith because of
Nice,
that placement, right?
and you've
And
got some Leo
Aries
Leo
midheaven.
stuff, right? You're my Leo guest today, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I am a
So
Leo, thrice fold.
so we've got Leo Sun, Cancer Moon, Cancer Rising here today.
Yep.
And I have to say, Janet, our promo picture that we created for this show today was the most epic I think ever. We had like this the sun and the moon, just like we were going to start our metal band. We've been joking about how.
Yeah, I'm feeling some real metal, heavy metal vibes in the air these
Oh yeah,
days in the astrology. So we can
very
talk
cool.
about that a little bit.
So Janet, where can we find your work, and where's the best place to follow you?
Well, the best place is probably through my newsletter. So you can go to my website, which is www.goodsigil, GOODSIGIL.com. And scroll to the bottom of the page. You can sign up for my newsletter. I send out, behind the scenes stuff and discount codes and occasionally I'm working on some exclusive things because I am starting to do astrological talismans. They're
Nice.
not prime quality, right? Because I'm a baby at this.
Sure,
So
sure, sure.
I don't want to like flood the market with crappy talismans.
Yeah. Well, it's all an experiment at some point, right? You got to kind of work out the kinks first, and
Yeah.
those things, if they go wrong, they could go pretty wrong, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So that's the best place to get the inside track. But I'm on Instagram and Pinterest and Twitter and Facebook probably too somehow. All the same name, Good Sigil.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. All right, so a couple more business things before we dive into our talk today. If you are enjoying these videos here, the first thing that you can do is to leave me a comment in the chat. Make sure you're hitting the like button and are subscribed to the channel on both Janet's newsletter, my newsletter. That's the best way to keep in touch with your favorite astrologers, jewelry makers, etc. If you want to make a material donation to the show today, there's a little $ in the chat box called a super sticker or a super chat. That contributes to the work that we do here. I also have a Decans webinar coming up, the Decans of Leo. Janet, you were there for the Decans of Cancer. Do you have fun?
Great.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Awesome. So we're going to be doing the Decans of Leo, which is actually my last live Decans webinar until I decide to maybe do it again. But I've gone through the entire cycle over the past year. It's been quite an endeavor, lots of research, lots of things learned, lots of humbling, learning all these stories and myths and fixed stars and tarot associations. But that's going to be on August the 20th at 1 p.m. a Saturday. You can still get 20% off of that using the code LEO20. So I hope that you'll join me for that. Come and celebrate Leo season with me and the completion of this labor of love. And we'll see what's next on the agenda as far as study. And I'm just still trying to formulate where I want to go next with some of the studies. But I'm always curious to hear if people have ideas. Janet, I'm going to take a look at the chat and welcome a few more people here today.
Wonderful.
We've got Amara stopping in from New Jersey. Hello, Amara. Tarja is joining us from Finland. Our Finland crew is back. We were missing you the last time, Finland friends. Betty is joining us from El Paso. Hello, Betty. Raven is giving you a nice compliment, Janet. Yes, you do great work, Janet. So she deserves all of the accolades, folks. Lynn says jewelers have always been alchemists. So I agree.
Pretty cool.
Devin is here from Portland. Hello, Devin. Nice to see you as well. And then another Tanya, another Cancer rising jeweler Tanya is here today. So that is very cool. And thank you, Devin, for your super chat. I really appreciate it, my friend. Okay, so thank you for stopping in. Again, it's so wonderful to have all of you here as a community. I love what we've built here together as friends. And let's dive into it. All right, Janet, big picture thoughts for some of this. We got a question coming up. It says, people are talking amongst themselves in the chat, which is cool. All right. So Janet, some big picture thoughts about the time that we're living through in space, or the space weather that we're going through here. What do you think?
You know what I was thinking about today, and this was partly inspired by your notes, but I was thinking about how that going through this new moon that's about to happen is very much like the camel threading the needle. What is that saying? Right. It's like we're passing through something that's like, it feels like a squeeze, like we're going through, and I don't know what's going to happen on the other side. I think there's a lot of like signatures that could be pretty explosive or, expansive in the nicest way to say it, but there's like a feeling of breaking through. So there's this like sort of squeezing through something right now.
Yeah, this is some of the hardest astrology of the entire year, isn't it? That we're coming up on in the next couple of weeks. Is it threading a camel through the eye of a needle? Something like that. That's a big animal to shove through a tiny space. So, but it's funny you bring that up because that is our animal for this new moon, the camel. We've gotten that in some times before, but the camel is a very well adapted animal, especially for heat, for harsh conditions, and we'll talk about that as we go along. We are talking about the new moon today that's going to be happening on July the 28th, which I believe is Thursday, depending on where you are in the world, at 1:55 p.m. Eastern time. Make the necessary adjustments for your time zone. And this is happening at about 5 degrees of Leo. We're also going to talk about the hexagram number 36 today, moving to hexagram 52 at the end of the show. We've got a number of things to cover today, Janet. We've got tarot. We've got myths, Egyptian myths. We've got Greek myths. We've got heroic myths. we've got malefic enclosures that I just kind of like kind of caught before we went live here. It wasn't originally in my notes, and I was looking at the chart today. I was like, oh shit, that's a malefic enclosure of Mercury. That'll be fun. So we'll try to break all that down here today. And we got another friend stopping in. Remco's here from the Netherlands. I hope that the heat is breaking for you, Remco. I know that we've been talking about these massive heat waves that have been going on in Europe and in North America here as well. I think we'll talk about that with Sekhmet as well. Like that was something in the story about that lion-headed goddess trying to destroy humanity. But maybe we all need to make a blood sacrifice or blood beer sacrifice. We'll talk about that in a second. But Janet, what do you say we pull the chart up and start looking at just the basics of this new moon, and then we'll kind of flip back and forth between some of the tarot stuff. So here we've got the chart of July the 28th, 1:55 p.m. Eastern time, as I was saying. Can you see that, Janet?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So, friends, we have the sun and the moon at 5 degrees of Leo. We have Mars making an overcoming square that's applying to both Mercury and Uranus and the North Node. The moon is peregrine. We're in the terms of Jupiter. We've got some tarot associations with the Five of Wands. What do you think here, Janet? What are you seeing just with this big layout here right away? What is popping out to you?
Well, we're coming into that trine, the sun and moon. Well, the moon will hit it first, obviously, with Jupiter and Aries, which is pretty fun.
Yeah.
That's like a very getting high on your own supply situation.
Right.
Like very puffed up, sort of exciting. I'm partial to fire signs. So this sounds fun to me, but I feel like it could have some negative implications too if you just go too far with things, especially with all of the other signatures that are about to happen, right?
Yeah, I think that is the one maybe mitigating aspect potentially to some of the other challenging things. Although, as you point out, moderation is the key. That Jupiter's hanging out in a decan of Aries that is very martial. It's one of the most martial places in the zodiac. It's a Mars ruled decan where we're trying to sever and separate from the collective to conquer a new territory. That's what the tarot, the Two of Wands, and that talks about. And that's problematic in modern times, as far as like we're trying to unravel the challenges of dealing with the fallout of colonialism and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts on how to reimagine those Aries cards in particular for maybe a modern sensibility. Do you have any thoughts off the top of your head with that?
Well, Jupiter is pretty close to my midheaven right now.
Yeah.
So I'm actually in the second decan of Aries because I'm right over the border. But I think it just has to do with bringing that spirit or fire in a way that's less destructive and less self-oriented, which is hard to grapple with when you're talking about Aries. But Aries is the self starting out and joining up with others, right? So I think there's potential there.
Yeah.
I think an interesting sort of manifestation of this is that the Pope is currently in Canada.
Oh, wow.
Apologizing for residential schools. And I can't speak to that too much because I'm not an Indigenous person, but just the Jupiter moon contact with the Pope and the people is an interesting alignment of happenings.
That's one of the things I've been kind of speaking a little bit about on this channel is Canada's seemingly more willingness to deal with their problematic past than potentially here in America, which is pretty frustrating, where a lot of American politics want to just sweep a lot of that stuff under the rug and just pretend like it never happened, where I'm sure that it's not perfect in Canada uh, yet, but but at least there seems to be some acknowledgement that there was an issue, right?
Yeah, it's a process, right? It's an
Yeah,
ongoing reckoning. Um, and, we as settlers, white settlers, have a lot of work to do.
yeah,
And obviously there's contingents in Canada that don't want to deal with that at all and don't
sure.
see it as a problem. So um, I think it's our responsibility to reckon with that, to experience the feelings, and to, put our feet on the ground and protect the environment, and
Yeah,
fight to get water to people who don't have clean drinking water. And you know
yeah. I think that's one of the biggest. I see that as the biggest crisis that we're facing right now. I mean, yes, we have these interpersonal challenges that are symptoms of that bigger, or that are maybe even contributing to that bigger problem. Um, but the ecological crisis right now, I don't know how much louder the alarm bells need to be ringing for us to maybe start to take some action. This is something I'm getting really frustrated about with American politicians, is the doing nothing about it, just watching it happen and watching people line their pockets while the earth burns. So very frustrating. And I think this is reflective of, as we record this, there's a Mars Mercury square that's perfecting. I think everybody's feeling a little fired up today.
oh
Like,
yeah.
so we're kind of dealing with we may be talking about some topics that bring up some strong emotions today, which I think is good. Some of that can be really cathartic. The reason we were chatting about some of those issues and challenges around Aries 1 is because that decan, that card, is called Dominion, according to the Golden Dawn. And really a lot of the themes around the Two of Wands card, and you brought some great decks with you today. I'm really curious to see some of these other decks, because I've been really sticking with the Rider-Waite as I learned tarot over the last, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years. I'm a tarot newbie on some level, compared to the card slingers that have been doing it much longer. But I'm pretty intense about my study, though. So,
Oh yes, you are very intense about your
um,
study.
like a little too intense sometimes. But here's the Rider-Waite version, where we've got the Two of Wands, where someone compared this to even Alexander the Great, thinking about what new territory they wanted to conquer. So there's some problematic things around that. But if we think about it metaphorically, it could be about, how do we establish sovereignty? I think we can learn how to establish personal sovereignty. And any initiatory decan is going to, I think, a lot of the times establish what the challenge is, and then we move towards maybe the balanced energy, and then maybe an excess of the energy or the results of it if we keep pursuing it, to I don't know, excessive ends with the third decan, right? So what do you have there for your other? I'm going to stop the share here for a second, because I'd like to go back and forth and see these cards. This is great. So we've got the Two of Wands here. Is that the Thoth deck?
Yeah, this is
Okay, so tell me more about some symbols that we have in that deck there.
honestly, I don't have them all memorized. This deck is so freaking dense. I'd have to get my book out, but I've got
So I
it
see
right here.
Mars. We've got Mars, right?
Yeah, Mars and Aries right there.
Right. So one of the ways you can think about Decanic Tarot is you've got a planet that rules the particular decan in the sign. So in this case, with this Two of Wands we're talking about, we have Mars in Aries, so a really fired up Mars. We're going to be talking today also about the Five of Wands, which is a continuation of that suit of Wands, and that element of fire. And I think it's appropriate to talk a little bit about the transition from Aries to Leo, because Aries initiates that fiery ambition. And what we're seeing is this, we're trying to figure out what our goals are, how we individuate, how we create personal sovereignty through Aries, how we create our own royalty, our kingship on some level, with your second decan of Aries on the midheaven, right? With the sun's decan, the exaltation of the sun. But then we get into Leo, and we see in this first decan of Leo, competition, right? Where we've maybe established some personal sovereignty. We know what we aren't. I think this is what the first decan of Aries is really doing, is saying, this is not what I am. I'm going to establish who I am through the process, but I'm going to reject what I'm not, right? And then we've got here the Five of Wands with this mock competition. what are some of the vibes you get from the Five of Wands card?
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, that's a funny card in this deck. This is my original Rider-Waite deck, and this card
Yes.
is actually completely soaked in root beer because I dropped a root beer in my bag at some point, or
Nice.
was like during a reading. But yeah, upset, right?
Yeah.
Like the 4 is such a structured foundational number, and so once you've got a 5 in there, you're breaking it apart. And so competition and striving to break out of that foundation, or to break out of that structure, um, you know,
Yeah. So
pressure. It's a Saturn one, right?
yeah. So you're touching on the name of the Golden Dawn name, the Lord of Strife, where we're
Mhm.
talking about striving. We've got a planetary ruler, Saturn, in the Sun's house. So inherently, we're already dealing with tension, with opposites in the thema mundi, with the Sun and with Saturn. So to me, Saturn binds us to things. It says you have to do this. It's like, all right, here, whether you want to do it or not, it's your time in the spotlight, like Austin would say it. It's time to
Yeah, yeah,
perform, right? It's time to step
yeah,
up. It's time to shine your light. No more incubating like we would in Cancer. It's time to go out of the nest and uh, proliferate your vision or whatever it is, right? But that can be uncomfortable at first. I think that's one of the things that I think about with this deck, and is the Saturn also can be related to fear sometimes and feeling afraid. There could be this duality to this decan where we really hunger for establishing an authenticity, like being the same externally as we feel internally, which is how I would define that, but also feeling a little bit of like, uh, Austin would call it stage fright, or a little bit of like we're dipping our toe into a new experience. It's like,
yeah,
this is scary. Like, so the nerves, right?
yeah. I love what Austin Coppock has to say about this deck, and it's pretty cool. That feeling of needing the light, but also, once you're in there, once you're in the spotlight, if you've ever been on stage, if you've ever performed, like, you can't see anybody else. It's
Right.
just you. You have to perform. That's the fear, that's the pressure. You become, elevated, you're put on the spot. You have to you have to perform, you have to break through. It's really those two things
And
kind of connect.
it gets real quiet on stage. I was a
Hmm.
professional musician for 20 years, and uh, I will say, I got real nervous before performing. The time leading up to the performance was always fraught with anxiety. And I still experience that a little bit with like my webinars when I'm like trying to prepare and I get really anxious. A lot of it is because we want people to like us and to respect us on some level too. It's trying to gain audience approval on some level. But I do know that as a Leo ascendant, and you probably feel this with all your Leo placements as well, when the spotlight does flip on, it's like, you're like, all right, it's just something happens and you're just in it. And
Yeah.
people have said that I've had that quality where it's like, oh, it just looks like a switch flip. You were such a mess when you were going up there. Then you seem so calm when the lights turned down. I was like, yeah, I don't know. It just happens. And I think that might be a Leo kind of thing, is there's a switch that a Leo placement can flip, where you are just like, all right, it's the sun's time to shine, right?
I don't have any placements in this decan, actually. All of my Leo stuff is in the second and third decan, but I do have a very, very close Sun Saturn square. So I know that feeling of being, you know, triangulated against yourself and against your greatest fears. But I think fear is such a powerful thing, because once you just completely submit yourself to it, um, it flows through you. Like,
Yeah,
if you allow that energy to move through you. And that's one thing I love about this card, is it's active, like it's
right,
happening. It's
right.
like, whether you want it to or not, it's moving. You will be confronted, you will experience it.
Yeah, five shake things up, don't they? I mean, it's like all right, it's time to get moving.
Yeah.
Another author that we both really enjoyed, T. Susan Chang with 36 Secrets. She has a great way of contextualizing each of the decans in like a chronological way that I really
Mm,
appreciate. And she talks a lot about the transition with Leo. You've got the competition, right? Like you've got the victor, and then you're trying to defend whatever you've established, right? So there's the three decans of Leo, the journey that we're going through. So here we're in the all right, it's the mock battle. The stakes may be, it's not like a life or death scenario, although it might feel like this. I used to teach songwriting classes at a community college, and oftentimes what I would tell my students is that in the course of human evolution, being ostracized from the group would feel like life threatening, like you needed the group's approval to be able to survive. But potentially in modern times, and this may or may not actually be true now, I think we still need each other to survive, but it may not be. The stakes when you're going up and playing a song may not necessarily be life or death, even though it taps into the same
yes.
instinctual place where you feel like you're dying if people aren't really excited about what you're doing.
I
Um,
mean, I felt like I was dying when we went live. So
well, you're doing great, Janet, and I love what you are all Leoing out today. I
I
love this. So you've got
have
your
to. It's my time. This is
yeah.
my time of year. That's all my returns. It's like my Venus, my lunar, my Mercury return. It's all happening. So
So you've got
there's a
the
couple of great
hat pin.
comments in the chat right
Yeah.
now,
What do we got?
actually.
Why don't you? What do we got here? What are you
Oh,
seeing?
I love someone clarified the camel comment.
Okay.
It's a biblical saying. It's easier for, if this is Rachel, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven.
Okay. Good.
So
Thank you,
that
Rachel.
brings another whole
Yeah.
layer
Absolutely.
of meaning to that. So
And that's one of the other struggles I think we're seeing with climate change is the corporate oligarchies' insistence on more and more and more, right? At the expense of the populace, right? So that could have some ramifications there for sure.
yeah, and then
Yeah, go ahead.
Devin's got a good one about the Two of Wands, cutting and separating ourselves from the colonial construct.
There you go. I like that, Devin. Yeah, see, this is what's great about our
Love that.
community here. We've got really great thinkers, and I love that people are able to kind of just add to this hive mind that we've created here,
Yeah.
because it brings such amazing insights. So that's great, Devin. I know Devin does a lot of work out in Portland with, trying to promote equality and things of that nature, and is involved in creating the new type of society that may be more fair and is moving on from some of these oppressive systems. So yeah, cutting and separating ourselves from colonial construct. There you go. So we've turned the archetype on its head,
Yeah.
and realizing that we still need to reject something, and we do need to kind of like create some kind of new um, territory, but one that's maybe more egalitarian and reflective of the need to band together as a global community to tackle some of the real challenges that face all of us in this modern time period. Okay, yeah, and Rachel's saying, I think that fear is a very healthy, normal response, so good to be open about it. I agree, Rachel. I think that fear sometimes gets a bad rap. Um, Oftentimes, fear is the thing that keeps you alive in the challenging moment, just a little bit, not all of it. Like healthy fear, I equate also to like a healthy respect and for whatever it is that is making you afraid. Like for example, if you get the adrenaline rush of like walking out into the street and a car is about to hit you, yeah, you're afraid and you move your ass out of the way, right? It's a survival instinct, and we may feel a little bit of that too as we move forward through these astrological trials by fire. Is we may get our adrenaline response activated, where we have to kind of keep our wits about us, and have a healthy respect for maybe just the forces of nature, for the forces of crisis, and how do we move through those crises, rather than I don't know, going off in so many chaotic directions that it's not as effective as it could be, the response, right? Okay, so we've got this Five of Wands here that's representing the sun and the moon in our new moon. Austin Coppock, of course, calls it the spotlight. T. Susan Chang calls it under pressure, combining the Saturnian constriction that we feel with the fiery heat of the sun. The daimon here is Hephaestus, which I thought was extremely appropriate. And I was thinking about you and Hephaestus with your metalworking and your ability to create these divinely inspired objects. And do you have any thoughts on Hephaestus? I know that thought you had a story about Hephaestus and your connection.
Oh, no, I was just doing some research over the last couple of days about Hephaestus, and I just, I mean, he's got some problematic stuff going on, right? Because he was cast out of Olympus because he wasn't like complete enough, or like,
right,
because he had an impairment or a disability. So I think that kind of speaks to some things that we're going through right now too, in terms of like disability justice and awareness of people who like need our support through the pandemic and are left behind by the fact that people just want to move on. And
yeah, that's challenging.
But yeah, too. I'm not a blacksmith. Blacksmithing is very different from silversmithing,
sure.
But I do occasionally use hammers and anvils.
Right. I mean, it's not a one-to-one correlation, but it's kind of, it's
very close, yeah.
Rotting things with fire and like, working hard with your hands and, Hephaestus. Yeah, go ahead.
Is he associated with also Virgo 1?
Yeah, that was interesting because in Austin's book, he talks about Hephaestus in Virgo 1. He's not actually the daimon of Virgo 1, but I think that this was Austin's kind of like, he thought the energy of Virgo 1 was very similar. So we've got Virgo 1 here, right? Which is, I think that is where that's coming from. But yeah, the hard work, like the laboring, this is Janet working hard on her.
That's where my lot of fortune is.
Is it? Nice. So,
and your Jupiter too, right?
My Jupiter, yeah, exactly. So we're laboring away for the sake of, I don't know what it would be for the sake of, the word that is popping into my mind is purification. The word that comes up for me with Virgo a lot is disgust. I don't know if you feel this a lot, but I have a strong disgust instinct where if something is out of order, I just have to fix it. Like most recently with my refrigerator, where my refrigerator was like so messy and disorganized that every morning I'd have to move a million things to get to what I wanted. And I can't tell you, Janet, how much joy it brought me. Over the last week, we got these little like shelves that are clear, that are organizational shelves that you can pull out and put back in. And just every time now I pull a shelf out and everything's in its right spot, I'm just like, oh my God, this is so amazing.
You've got Virgo problems.
I know.
Virgo solutions.
Right. But it's so, I made me so happy. Like, and my daughter has Jupiter in Virgo too. And I showed her one day, I was like, look at this. And we were kind of making fun of my partner because my partner's like, why are you so excited about this? I was like, this is, you've just given us the greatest gift in the world by helping us with this. And I'm like, Sophie, go look at this. And she's like, ooh, she had this really great response to it. So, yeah, it's the little things. But Hephaestus, right? Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, of course, yes, born with a congenital impairment at birth, was a son of Zeus and Hera in some myths. In other myths, was created, was the word parthenogenically? I think it is self-created by Hera.
Oh, yeah.
In response to Zeus self-creating Athena. So there's various versions of this. Some say that he had a disability from birth. Others say that he gained his impairment by being cast off of Olympus by Zeus or by Hera, actually, in disgust. There's various versions of this. That some say that Zeus cast him off the mountain for defending Hera. Others say it was Hera that was like this is not perfect, so see you later. Uh, so that there's some that I find interesting because this decan is Saturn ruled, and one of the significations with Saturn is exile. So I think that one of the things that I could see, like if you were born with Saturn and Leo, or you have strong placements here, is maybe feeling that your light is denied for a period of time, right? Where it is eclipsed, it is dampened, and there's a lifelong battle to be able to bring that light to the surface. So there's challenge around it, right? What else got? Anything else with Hephaestus here?
Well, there's the cool tie-in that we were talking about. There's the story of Hephaestus and Dionysus riding donkeys into battle.
Right.
And the braying of the donkeys was what scared off their match. And so
that feels like very 80s, like Mattel toy thing, like battle donkeys, right?
Yes, yeah, but it's also like incredibly metal, like heavy metal.
Oh yeah.
The braying of donkeys.
Nice.
Have you ever heard a donkey bray? It's
it's
special.
crazy.
It's so great.
It's crazy. Yeah, so we are referring to the fixed stars that are in this decan, right? So we've got Ocellus Borealis, the northern donkey, or the northern star in that pair, and Ocellus Australis, which is, I believe, the southern, unless I'm getting those mixed up. I think that's correct. And those are at about 7 and 9 degrees of Leo. The donkeys of Dionysus, they were associated with Hephaestus, but also there's some stories that talk about that they helped Dionysus across a very hot marsh, or like a marsh when he was like melting in the heat of the sun. So I thought that was kind of an interesting tie-in too.
The donkey quality.
Right. A service animal, right? So something that's really trying to be of service, something that is very tough and that has a lot of utilitarian use as well, like as far as like as a good service animal on the farm. You're saying you had a rural background, right?
I did grow up on a farm, but we weren't like a functional working farm. We were more of a hobby farm, but I grew up around a lot of work animals and food animals. So we didn't have donkeys. We had turkeys, and they're just as horrifying. Right. In terms of the noises they make. Oh yeah, they're actually quite terrifying.
The worst animal sound I've ever heard is a guinea fowl scream. Have you ever have experiences with them?
Oh boy.
Those things will scare the crap out of you. But yes, turkeys are loud. Peacocks are really loud if we're talking about loud animals. And so
we digress.
Well, exactly. All right. So we have these fixed stars that are talking about, one of them is a little bit more less harsh than the other. The northern donkey is a little bit less harsh. The southern one's kind of a jackass and can like really be kind of a pain in your butt. That one in a lot of the stories was the one that would buck and wouldn't do what it was told, and like kind of was very rebellious. So there's some themes that could come in with that as well. Let's see what else we have here. One other thing that I wanted to chat about with the five of wands was the Kabbalistic tree of life Sephira, Gevura or Gabura. I've heard two different pronunciations. This is Gevura in the world of Atziluth, which is the fire world, or the the spirit ether world on some level. And Gevura is a Mars energy center, I guess you could call it. I don't even know what to call the Sephira necessarily, but these pathways. And that tree of life has these two energy centers. For those unfamiliar, we've got like Hesed over here, which is a Jupiter Sephira, Gevura over here, which is Mars. And then you have the strength card in between, right? That is a pathway in between those two to balance them out. So you have some Mars, you have a Mars midheaven. What do you think about the relationship with Gevura and this five of wands energy? And maybe how do we set limits to our passions on that in regards to like movement from the four?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the four is one of my favorite cards in the deck. I just adore it for some reason, the Four of Wands. But yeah, I think it speaks to a word that I don't actually see a lot in describing the Strength card, but commitment, which is like, the Strength card is usually talking about like defeating the animal, or not defeating, but overcoming the animal passions, right?
Right.
There's like, the Thoth deck calls it lust as well. So you've got like those passions bubbling up. And the story of Heracles with the lion and needing to use actually his hands to defeat the lion, speaks to that, like the necessity of using the body to overcome what is the body, what makes us up. And so I think that one of my keywords for strength is always commitment. It's like and that's very Saturnian. But so maybe not so much the Jupiter-Mars connection, but that is a way to work with that Jupiter-Mars, which can be so extreme. Like, those two energies can cause things to just explode so much, which is also what aren't we getting that with the, oh no, that's Mercury.
Yeah. Well, it's all wrapped up in it, isn't it? I mean, there's so many layers to all of this. When we've got that Strength card, like you were alluding to, the Nemean lion, which was one of the labors of Hercules, actually the first labor of Hercules, where, just a quick background with Hercules, who I think is a very solar symbol, right? There's been various astrologers that have talked about the labors of Hercules reflecting the movement of the sun over a solar year throughout different parts of the zodiac, which I think is very fascinating. I think that we've got Hercules, who was one of Zeus's children, and of course there's a paramour that he mated with that made Hera very angry, and Hera, drove Hercules to madness, to the point where he committed infanticide, which was one of the most horrific things you could do. I mean, even now, but back then that was like the greatest sin, quote unquote, that you could commit, besides hubris to the gods, right? And Hera basically made him go sublimate himself to a king. I can never pronounce the king's name. It's that E name, Eurystheus.
Oh yes,
yes.
I think that's it.
There's Eurystheus. There's too many consonants with S's in that one, but basically that was Hera's chosen champion to be kind of king of humanity, whereas Zeus wanted Heracles to be this. So Heracles had to kind of humble himself before Hera's chosen leader, and this king sent him on all these very challenging missions to atone for the loss of control of his instinctual nature, I would call it, on some level. So to me, I see that Strength card just exactly like you were saying. Like, how do we utilize the power of our, humility, the power of our will, our mind, to overcome some of the animal instinctual forces that when left unchecked can wreak havoc in our lives and with people that we love, even too. That's the thing too. This wasn't a foe of Hercules. He hurt the people he loved. And I think this was something that to think about through this new moon too, is sometimes we save the most challenging battles for our loved ones. And it's
absolutely.
I was talking to you before that we came on live. I've been going through this with the transition with a child growing into adulthood and wanting to establish sovereignty and wanting to establish independence. And the last few weeks before moving out, and how painful that can be for both parent and child, and like some of the challenges of learning a new role. I think that's another thing to tie in with this new moon, Janet, is, Austin talks about wearing a mask, trying on a new role, and sometimes there's a discomfort period when we figure out what our new role is. Like, you can feel a little bit lost when you're trying on this new persona, this new identity that is necessary to move forward. If you are trying to treat people in the way of the old role, that's when you can really create, I guess, evils on the earth, is trying to hang on to something that isn't vital anymore, right?
Mm.
And we seem to be doing this as a collective too. We've got people that want to hang on to an old reality that it really only benefited a certain amount of people, but in addition, there is some like nostalgia for something that may not have even been real. Does that make sense? Yeah,
Definitely.
especially here in America, as a Cancerian country, there's this longing for this past it really never existed, and there's I guess, mythology, or if you want to be more harsh about it, propaganda around it that was fed to us as young people here in this country as well. And I'm sure that this happened in Canada to a certain degree as well, maybe a little bit less so. I don't know. I didn't grow up there, so you'll have to speak to that. But in America, there was always this like, I don't know, trying to feed our heads with, this is the greatest place in the world to be, and you know we need to help everyone else, and if we could only get back to this certain glory. And it's just like so sad when we've had so much information to the contrary of how that reality was not true for everyone, that reconciling with that it's painful, I think, for a lot of people. And how do we come into alignment with the new roles that we need to play with one another, right? What do you think about that? What's the Canadian version of that and the Canadian experience of that?
Oh, that's a good question. A lot of a lot of what we were, a lot of what was shoved down our throats propaganda wise was that we weren't American.
Right.
Right. So there was this contrast, but we're more alike than you could ever imagine, right?
Yeah.
It's just, there was more of a focus on being like apologetic. I mean, obviously everyone knows about sorry. We say sorry.
Politeness. Yeah.
And being helpers.
Right.
But I think that actually is a mask, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a bit of an illusion.
Right.
We talked briefly, and I'm not a professional astrologer, everyone, but I'm definitely not a mundane astrologer. But we talked briefly before this about like a few of the different proposed birth charts for Canada. And one of them is an Aries rising, which a lot of people wouldn't necessarily take, but it's got Neptune right on the ascendant there.
Wow.
And I think that really speaks a lot to a potential way that Canada could be seen as a nation, right?
What is
We have
the
a
sun?
really good.
What's the sun sign that in that chart?
Oh, also Cancer.
Cancer. Okay.
Yeah.
So dueling Cancer suns, right?
Yeah, because our birthday would be July 1st.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense then, because then what we do share is that kind of what Liz Green would call Ouroboros incest, this longing to return to the womb and to be in this like protected, safe space where, we can be very kind to our own kin that we see as part of our family, but then the other is kept at bay or are externalized with that hard shell type of thing. Although that's not even necessarily true with the way that both countries have treated their indigenous people as well. So it's so much going on. So remind me, how much newer is Canada, or older than America? Is Canada also going through a Pluto return?
Oh, no, I think
Okay.
Canada's only like 156 or something.
Okay.
Maybe 157. I haven't been paying attention because I don't celebrate Canada Day.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's making, the way that things are going, sometimes it makes it hard to like celebrate any of these archaic patriotism based holidays, right? I personally I like to eat, so on certain days I'll still eat, but
Well, yeah.
I'm not gonna call it anything else rather than like
Yeah.
I love this food day. Here's hot dog and turkey day. Like, like that's kind of how I see it on some level. We've got some really great comments coming in, new folks
Yeah.
stopping in. So I wanted to acknowledge the folks that are stopping in. Daniel says, Daniel Norman. Hello, Daniel.
Daniel is a Leo 1 sun.
Oh, so this is a friend of yours as well?
Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you for bringing Daniel to the chat. Welcome, Daniel. Saying perhaps Hephaestus and the donkeys point to something about usefulness in Leo 1. Yeah, wanting to be of service on some level, right? Daniel, I think to that point, I will say that what I've learned at being a Leo rising and North Node, I would say, is that part of being a good leader is always keeping service in your mind with leadership. When you utilize your spotlight, when you utilize your platform for service and for uplifting others, that's when I think that the energetic forces support it. When you utilize that platform for self-serving interests and for just ego-based things, which I consider the opposite of modesty. The I-Ching talks about modesty having the goal be more important than the ego. So I think that can be reflected in this Leo 1 thing too. So that's a great point, Daniel. We've got Darren stopping by from the UK. D, hello D. It's okay. Portia is here. Urania Universe is here. Going to be joining me on August the 3rd to talk about the full moon of this cycle, which is very cool. So welcome, Portia. Prudence is here as well. Hello, Prudence. Am I missing him? Tarya T is here. We've got the two Taryas are talking in the I can't even think of more alliteration there, but welcome, Tarya. Let's see. Nat is stopping in from the UK. Cherry's Channel that's a new name, is coming from Chico, California. Welcome, Cherry. I think you are from the same city as one of my favorite American football players, Aaron Rodgers. I'm thinking about that today because training camp is starting for the Green Bay Packers, my team. And I will say this is kind of funny. Aaron Rodgers, who is a problematic figure lately because he has some views that I don't agree with, especially when it comes to the pandemic and things like that. But he's a Sagittarius, and he has a Sagittarian sense of humor where he's constantly kind of messing with people, and he shows up at training camp in different like costumes, sort of. And today he showed up at training camp dressed as the guy from Con Air, like what is Nicolas Cage from Con Air with like the like what is that thing called, the tank top and the long hair, the long greasy hair. It was pretty. I have to admit, it was pretty funny. Like I have some issues with Aaron Rodgers. He's kind of a dick sometimes, but that was pretty funny. So thank you. That's a long way of saying welcome, Cherry from Chico, California.
Well, look at her comment. They graduated from the same high school.
You did. Awesome.
And Daniel's saying go Packers. So you're not alone here, Spencer.
That's awesome. So say hi to Aaron Rodgers if he's in the neighborhood for me, because Cherry, you'll have to tell us what his character is really like, because he plays his cards a little close to the vest sometimes. Like I said, he's got some he's gone on an interesting journey lately, but he's a great football player. And that
digression is great because it actually makes me think about how this card is it's playful too.
Yeah.
And there's the idea of mock battle, right? Like to be challenged is a way to come to float to the top or to achieve leadership, right? Like people can see you in action doing the thing that you need to do in order to be, MVP or whatever. I don't know sports.
No, you're right on track. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is a 4-time most valuable player of the National Football League.
There you go.
And I will say this too, T. Susan Chang does mention him in her book 36 Secrets.
Oh, really?
In regards to Leo 3.
Okay.
So he does get a shout out.
That's hilarious.
Because her son is a huge Packers fan. So I thought that was pretty funny as well. All right. So yes, go Packers. Daniel says, Cherry, same high school. This is a small world, isn't it?
It is.
And Mortal and Wild is here from UK. What did you miss? Well, you've missed a few things, but
Mostly just me being a chaotic Mercury retrograde combust person.
well, I'm right there with you. I've got Mercury retrograde combust in the 12th house, so we're just
How
on
is this chat even happening? How are we even doing this live stream?
preparation. Let's see. I do have a an outline that we've been roughly not following.
We're roughly not following the outline, but it's going very well.
We're doing our Cancerian thing here with going sideways and
Yeah, you gotta feel it out.
That's right.
Feel it out.
Exactly. We're feeling it out today. So we've got Carol is Mortal and Wild joining us from the UK. Welcome, Carol. Dimfy is here from the Netherlands. It's good to see you, Dimfy. I'm looking to see if Cherry has any more Aaron Rodgers tidbits. He was a few years ahead of me, but definitely left his mark on the school. Okay. No idea I would have contributed so much to the conversation today, Cherry. Oh, we're so happy that you're here, though. Devin says getting challenged is also how we get pulled out of the Four of Cups, which is a kind of complacency. Yes, I love it.
Absolutely.
It's a great point,
I love
Devin.
that.
Right. We finally have to say, hey, you've been meditating under the Bodhi tree long enough. You've satisfied all your bodily desires. Now it's time to find purpose. That's the transition, I think, between Four of Cups and Five of Wands on some level. Remco says, Five of Wands, perhaps being scouted at a high school game, growing and rising to visibility. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, and Lynn's talking about all my Virgo placements. Like, Lynn, you have no idea. When small child me knew every single player on the Green Bay Packers from player 1 through player 53, or now I know all of them through the 90-man roster. And I could probably recite statistics to you, like off the top of my head. It's pretty weird what sticks in a Cancerian/Virgo brain, when you're collecting all this stuff. But I would have my grandparents, and forgive me for a nice memory here, but my grandparents were from Milwaukee, and I would go up to visit them on the weekends and watch football. And Packers was like a religion in that state of Wisconsin, right? It was one of the only good childhood memories, not the only, but it was a good childhood memory in a broken home. It was a place of stability and security. So that's why I have such a passion for it. And I would have, when I moved to Michigan, I would have my grandparents mail me the newspaper from Milwaukee so I could look at the box scores and the articles around it. That's how obsessed I was as a young child with like statistics and like sports and competition. I mean, I think it is a Leo thing. The other thing I will say is that, traditionally the Summer Olympics happen during Leo season as well. And that is one of the themes I saw come into play, especially with the second decan of Leo, the Six of Wands with the laurel, the crown of laurels, which was what would crown a victor. So I love the Olympics. I don't know about you, but the Olympics was one of my favorite things growing up because it was competition, but it was also a time that nations would make peace with one another to come together for sport. The internationalness of what really appealed to me as a young person. Now, I understand now that there's some problematic things about it, that it's not the perfect idealistic thing that I thought it was, but yeah, I digress.
The Olympics. I mean, it speaks to a lot of these Leo themes, right? And especially the five and six. Yeah, I live in a city where we hosted the Olympics about 12 years ago, and so that really changed the city, and not in some not good ways. So
sure. Anytime you're hosting a huge event with masses of people coming, that creates all sorts of challenges. I have a small version of that by living near Ann Arbor, Michigan, where the University of Michigan is, where they have a football stadium that holds over 100,000 people. And when football happens, everything just kind of shuts down. There's traffic issues, all sorts of infrastructure challenges when you've got that going on. But Raven's pointing out my Cancerian nostalgia. Yes. Guilty as charged.
It is very strong.
It's real. It's real. Do you get this? What are you nostalgic for, Janet?
Oh yeah, I'm super nostalgic. Just yesterday I was out with some friends. We went to the lake because it's really hot here. And we went and we got ice cream cones afterwards, and I was like, I am very specific about what kind of ice cream I want. And I go in there and I want that double chocolate raspberry, but I saw the tiger tail and I had to have the tiger tail because tiger tail was my brother's favorite ice cream and he's a Cancer. And I just like was inspired. But tiger tail is a really funny ice cream. It's orange with black licorice streaks.
Wow. I don't think I've ever even heard of that. Is this
It's
a Canadian?
Canadian.
Is it Canadian? Yeah. I was gonna say, like, we don't have that in America. And if we do, maybe it's called something else. So orange ice cream
Orange flavored ice cream
with black licorice. Wow. Okay, that's intense. I'm gonna have to try that.
I don't even really like it that much, but I enjoy it because it means something to me.
Right, right. My version of that was mint chocolate chip growing up. That was, yeah. So, okay. It's summertime.
I feel similarly about that.
Talk ice cream, right? So double chocolate raspberry. Oh, now you're
started.
I know. Now you're hitting my Taurus moon nerve here.
Is it lunchtime yet?
All right. Okay, we're gonna focus. Here we go. Ready?
Oh my God. Yeah, we've got a couple things still to talk about. We were going to talk about strength.
Yes, let's talk a little. So we've
talked about strength.
We talked about strength. We've got the Sun card that also can represent Leonine themes. Let's talk just about the Sun in general here, because I think that sometimes the Sun is a little bit misinterpreted in astrological circles. What are some of your thoughts of what the Sun might represent within a chart, within this card? Because I think the themes are fairly similar, but what do you got for us?
I mean, vitality is the first word that comes to mind, right? Like,
yeah.
As someone with the Sun in Leo, I have like incredible energy and like I don't get sick very often. It's like something that you can completely take for granted, the Sun, no matter where it is. But when it's not doing well in a chart, it's, you also feel it, like it becomes an issue. And especially when it comes to, eye stuff.
Yeah.
So weird. My dad is also a Leo Sun and he's getting hit by that Saturn opposition, and he's had 3 eye surgeries in the past couple of months.
Wow.
It's pretty scary for him, I think. But yeah, the Sun, I mean, I found a really great Sun card interpretation that I quite liked when I was doing my research for this, which is from the Alchemical Tarot. And he's got it represented as like the Hyros Gamos, the wedding of the Sun and Moon.
Nice.
And so that refers to the conjunction. It refers to the new moon, which is a pretty nice sort of tie-in with that new moon we're supposed to be talking about.
I like the vitality. I love that, we talk about certain planets rule various body parts. So we've got the right eye specifically for the Sun. I think about the Sun as the divine mind as well. Like think about what the Sun does. It brings life, but it also can destroy too. So if there's Hellenistic doctrines about when you get too close to the Sun and the combustion that we were talking about, it can harm something. So there is this duality that happens with the Sun where it is life-giving, but put on the sunscreen and don't get too close to the king, quote unquote, where you're going to get burned. I like I don't necessarily always see the Sun as our personality. I think that there's an awareness of what we want to maybe aspire towards with the Sun. I feel like it's an aspirational thing.
Well, aspirational refers to spirit, right?
Right. Yes. There you go.
And so that becomes, then we can talk about the lot of spirit and the lot of fortune and like the Sun Moon contrast between spirit versus body.
Right.
But that is why I loved this, because it was the conjunction of the two, right?
I love it.
Yeah. Quite a nice one.
So we've got the Sun creating an aspiration, a spiritual aspiration that is at the new moon, infusing that light into the body of the moon collecting that light seed to grow into something physical. So that's something we talk about a lot when we're learning traditional astrology, is the physical nature of the moon and the spiritual nature of the Sun. So divine intelligence, Portia is talking about. Yeah,
I was just going to say that. Perfect. So great.
And that's really great because a lot of times we think of Mercury as the mind, we think of Mercury as like our intelligence, but I think the sun can equally represent that. Mercury being more maybe the technical skills that we utilize to communicate that divine intelligence of the sun. There's a relationship between the two, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Definitely. I like that. I like the idea of the new moon being like the embodiment of that, like bringing that divine intelligence into the body.
yeah.
There's something about Leo moon people, right, who have like this incredible presence, and like it's like the spirit is in there. You
Oh yeah,
can feel it.
oh yeah, for sure. Um, all right, so we've broken down some of the sun significations: vitality, giver of life, clarity, vision, right eye, illumination, right? But something coming to light. Royalty, having a royal nature, like your own inner royalty or sovereignty, personal sovereignty. Self-expression, creating harmony between the body and the mind. This was something that I got from T. Susan Chang's Tarot Deciphered book, where she was talking about the relationship between the Sephira Yesod, which is the moon, and Hod, which is Mercury. So the sun gives us a pathway between Mercury and the moon in that Kabbalistic tree of life. So I thought that was kind of fascinating, like kind of unifying body and mind through that as well. One other detail from that book is that there's 22 rays on this card that represent the 22 major arcana in the tarot. And that you've got straight and squiggly lines here that could be a reference to the masculine and feminine, or the yin and the yang energy that is interspersed throughout the tarot as well. And the divine child, right? This kind of innocence, and we've got sunflowers in the background my neighbor has planted a bunch of sunflowers and they're coming to bloom right now. It's really beautiful. I'm starting to appreciate them, how they're blooming during Leo season now. I'm starting to make the connection that, wow, they're little mini suns, it's very cool.
Oh yeah.
All right. So
love that.
We've got the sun, we've got strength. We've talked about the Nemean lion.
There's another cool tie-in with the strength card with the lion, right? Because in a lot of the much older decks, you will see either a man wrestling with the lion or a woman in a more physical way, which is very Hercules, but it's also Samson.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And some of those images would actually show a woman or a man breaking a column, which is a reference to Samson as well. But the story with Samson, I'm not like an expert in this stuff, but he like kills the lion, and then when he's coming back from his like journey, he sees that the bees have made honey in the carcass of the lion, which is also feels like a very like solar fermentation thing. Robert Place, who's one of my favorite tarot deck creators, this deck I love. That's the one where the sun is from. I'll hold them up so you can actually see them. He puts strength with the alchemical process of fermentation. So I thought that was a cool tie-in. The like using the body of the lion to
I have his book over here somewhere, the Tarot, Magic, Alchemy, Hermeticism, and Neoplatonism.
Yeah, get into it. I love Robert Place.
Yeah, he's a great historian of the tarot as well, right? Yeah, like, and some of these books I have that I just have not just cracked into completely yet, but that one, it's on my shelf. So now I'm interested in engaging with it more, for sure.
I haven't read any of those books.
I know. I'm so
don't worry.
I keep ordering more. I just see something good and I'm just like, all right, I got to put that on the shelf. But you can see, like, I heard, like, the references I did for today, I've got like 7 or 8 books, and at a certain point you're just like, okay, like I'm kind of
this is only half the pack.
There you go. Exactly. That's nice though. And I think that reflects some of the aspirational quality of Leo too, is that we're always trying to reach maybe for something just slightly beyond our grasp. And I think that there's something, where we are like, bringing in more and collecting light. And fire is something that when it touches something, it consumes it. So we're trying to consume all these great books, this great literature. And sometimes it's a little bit ambitious, right? More ambitious than we can possibly do. Striving, there you go, bringing it full circle. We've got one more myth I think that we can bring into the play here before we kind of move forward. What do you think about the Egyptian goddess Sekhmet? Because I thought that there were some really neat significations with that. You sent me a really cool post about Sekhmet.
Yeah. So I share my studio space where I make jewelry with a friend of mine who's a fiber witch. She's a fiber artist and makes natural pigments out of rocks she finds. It's very cool.
That's cool.
But she's tuned me into all of these really neat people on the old internet. And there's this guy I follow on Instagram called a.rural.pen. And he makes ink, like drawing and painting ink, out of guns. He buys guns from pawn shops. And so he's taking materials of war and violence, and he dissolves them in acid in like an alchemical process to distill the pigments from the iron and steel, which is very, very cool.
Wow.
And so he has an ink that he calls Sekhmet Red.
Mm-hmm.
And he originally was talking about it as a libation to Sekhmet, but it's a reference to the story of Sekhmet going on a rampage and killing all of humanity. And Ra is her father, right?
Right.
And Ra's like, I don't really want you to do this. Could you like totally stop? and then so there's priestesses who mix in this red ochre, mm-hmm. which is probably was coming from hematite, which is, hem being the part of same etymological word as blood. Very Mars, iron mineral. So they mix in the red ochre from hematite with all of this beer, and they pour it out to make it look like Sekhmet has killed everybody and it's blood flowing. But then she gets drunk on the beer, the red beer, and like is sated and starts purring and rolling around like my cat.
Wow. That is an intense story because Sekhmet is a solar deity as well, right? Being a daughter of Ra. When you sent me this post, I was like, wow, we need to do like a huge communal ritual where we make some like red dyed beer and just like pour it out into these drought, ridden deserts or whatever it is,
I think about like the heat of the summer and this peak of the year. What it feels better, like what is more calming than just like, once the sun is sort of going down and it's still hot outside, having like an ice cold beer.
Yeah. Well, and I love that, like the man, what a cool idea to like, it reminds me of the Orphic hymn to Mars or to Ares, where we are talking about praying to Ares to turn the weapons of war into plowshares and into something that can be used creatively. And what a great, wonderful idea to take those guns, those weapons of war, and turning into something
very cool. I'll
beautiful.
Put his name in the chat.
Yeah.
Because it's really cool.
Very cool. And so this is another primordial Leo lion symbolism, because a lot of the Western astrological themes are drawing heavily from Egyptian lore. The Greeks borrowed very heavily from Egyptian myth. So it's good to kind of see something that may be, even predate some of the Greek myths that we're talking about. And of course, Leo, we talked about the Nemean lion. The Greek understanding is that Hera rewarded the Nemean lion by putting it into the stars as the constellation for harassing Hercules or something like that. And we had talked about that this lion was impervious to weapons, to iron, bronze, stone, and Hercules had to use his bare hands to wrestle the beast. So there is something inherently human about overcoming some of these challenges that we've chatted about. Okay. One other last little thing that I thought was super cool is that there was a little tidbit in one T. Susan Chang's book where she said that 5 degrees Leo, right where this new moon is, was actually the start of the Golden Dawn's zodiacal solar year. And I
Yeah,
was
that's
like,
very interesting.
yeah, I've never heard that before. And I wonder.
Well, it lines up with the pagan wheel of the year, right? Like
Yeah.
this, it would be, I can never pronounce it right. Lunasa,
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
And Lammas, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Those.
on the first there. So that makes the cross quarters really make sense.
Absolutely.
Something
Very
there.
cool. Just that, just a little tidbit, little factoid for you. I'm taking a look at the chat here. We've got people who are very impressed by the artistic ways of the Sekhmet story. We've got Rachel says, I'm really enjoying the way your engines and ideas are coming together. Very rich and unique. Very cool. Well, thank you, Rachel. I love your little sunflower emoji. Carol says that's the alchemical story too. Ferment and beer, red lion, signifying an ending of that phase in the process. Yes.
I know. I was trying to bring like the beer connection in here.
Yeah.
Like always.
Right.
Because then we also have like back to Hephaestus on the donkeys.
Yeah.
He's with Dionysus, right? Like
Sure.
there had to be wine.
Yeah, yes, God of wine for sure. Ecstasy, divine ecstasy. I'm sure that the craft beer industry is pretty big in Vancouver,
It's
right?
huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I live my life. I love beer. I'm a big beer snob, beer nerd. And we do a lot of brewing on our own too. Like we brew
Nice.
mead and braggot and beer. And so I was like finding all of these interesting threads, and I was like, I could just talk about beer.
Right, there you go. Bring it all
It's
full
too
circle.
early to have beer, so I still just have coffee.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I've got some water here today. It's hot up here. I'm in the second story
It is hot.
of
It's
a
very hot. I
two-story
think today
building.
will probably be one of the hottest days of the year where I am.
Wow.
But that kind of brings us back to the astrology.
Yeah, and Devin's pointing out that Lammas was a time of harvesting wheat, so bringing in the fermentation thing as well. Devin does some really interesting. I'm sure that Devin does fermentation stuff, but does charcuterie out in Portland as well. Like so, doing some fermented meats and things of that nature as well.
I have a friend who does that too. It's really interesting.
I love that there's on the West Coast in particular. There's this kind of culture of like really the self-reliance and like kind of like maker culture, that I wish we had. We have a little bit of that here in Michigan. I mean, there's makers here, but it feels like it's a little bit more of an ethos out west a little bit in that Pacific Northwest area, which I appreciate. Someplace I'd love to visit at some point in my life.
You're welcome anytime.
Well, this is why I do this. This is why I'm collecting all of these
We're
friends.
going to Finland. We're going to the Netherlands.
Exactly. We're
going to Aaron Rodgers High School.
There, yes, there we go. Perfect. So good. So good. Because I'm collecting couches to crash out. I think they're doing this potentially. Wow. Mostly I just love talking to people from other places in the world and getting different perspectives. And, to me, the world is one big happy family in great Cancerian style. So I hopefully just, tearing down those borders that keep us separated is an important skill to be able to do and to learn in these times where it's really necessary, where more than ever our actions affect one another across borders, across, you and I are speaking from 5,000 miles away right now, it blows my mind sometimes, right?
Yep.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, Tarya says world tour. Hey, that would be cool. Let's go on tour with our metal band here, Janet. Okay. So yeah, I when I was doing the advertising for this week, I had a Tenacious D song that I did for Janet, which I thought was appropriate, and then a Stray Cat Strut for Leo season. Okay, Janet, let's talk a little bit more about the astrology. So we've talked about kind of the sun and the moon here at 5 degrees of Leo. One thing I like to do as we get a little further on here is just talk about a few of the aspects that happen throughout the cycle. The first thing that we're seeing is, as this is going on, I wanted to point out that Mercury is in malefic enclosure. Now, this is something that I didn't really realize was happening for until this morning when I looked at the chart and I was like, man, I missed that. But there's so many things to think about. But a malefic enclosure, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is a Hellenistic technique where a planet is either being enclosed by body, like for example, the sun is on the other side of Mercury right now, and let's say the moon was on this side, it would be enclosed in the lights, all right? But here we have something where Mercury is being enclosed by the rays of the malefic on either side of Mercury. So we're going to have the exact square of Mercury and Mars probably as we're doing this show today at about 3:15 p.m. Eastern time. And then once it moves in the square with Mars, it'll start applying to an opposition to Saturn. And this is kind of where Mercury is between a rock and a hard place type of thing, where it's a tough time for Mercury. And not only is Mercury going in this malefic enclosure, it's going to be squaring Uranus and the North Node, and we have the application of Mars and Uranus and the North Node happening through the first week of August as well. Janet, what can we do to navigate these difficult mercurial, martial, Saturnian waters? What do you think?
Oh, I mean, a lot of folks on the old Astro Twitter have just been saying, stay home. Mm-hmm. Don't do anything dangerous. I have a friend who's on a motorcycle trip right now.
Oh boy.
And so we've just been saying, man, take it easy, be careful, don't go too fast that day.
Extra caution.
I'm speaking specifically about the conjunction of Mars, Uranus, and the North Node. But yeah, Mercury is definitely taking us from this current moment with the square to Mars into that next configuration. I think I would just again say passing the camel through the head of the needle, right?
Yeah.
Be humble. Don't think that you can do more than you can do. Coming off of that trine of this new moon and Jupiter, like that can give you, it can make you think that you can do more than you actually can.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things about the Hercules story is that before he was humbled by Hera, he did all sorts of crazy, things that were reflective of a great hero. And he got a little bit high on his own supply, right? That we were talking about. Are you still there, Janet? What, did something happen? Did we frozen? Uh-oh. Are we there?
I got a message that my internet was unstable.
Uh-oh. Hold on a second.
Am I back?
I can hear you. Yeah, your video's a little frozen there. There you go. I think you're back now.
That's okay. It's not great.
We're getting closer to the Mercury-Mars square. So we'll see if we can wrap this up before Mercury and Mars.
My lunar return.
Uh-oh, frozen Janet.
Return is exact.
Oh man. We're getting the shaky time here. Are you still with us? Janet is here in the chat. So Janet's typing in the chat. So I will try to carry the ball here for a minute until Janet is back. I can see her now. Are you there, Janet?
I'm here.
All right, there we go. I can hear you.
So I think the moon was trying to reclaim me.
Right.
It's my exact lunar return to the minute at this moment. Oh boy. So.
Well, like I said, we're also heading into the exact square of Mercury and Mars, so we'll try to get through this here. Although I love chatting with you and hanging out. This is a part of, I just love the fun that we have together on these chats with all these friends from around the world. So yes, Janet's advice as far as taking your time, trying not to get overly ambitious, trying not to let pride lead you down to the path of hell, right? This is something that's been going on in my household, is like there's been some pride challenges with two Leo risings in the house. One of them trying to establish an independent identity, and the other a little bit nostalgic for the the child parent relationship. So the key is kindness, and the key is mutual respect. But again, this can be important for your conversations too. Think twice before you say something. Think about how it may affect someone else. Try not to let, the issue at hand get lost in feeling of being disrespected. Stick to the actual issue and how you can get to the yes with the person you're dealing with, rather than feeling like you're being insulted or something like that. Does that make sense, Janet? Right?
Yeah. It was Camille Michelle on the Astrology podcast forecast said, don't shoot the messenger.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So like we have to sort of dull our reaction. That might be the Saturn influence. Yeah. Like, you don't need to be right off the draw. You can take your time. You can think about it before you say something or react.
Well, because the conflict that may come up with the square between Mars and Mercury could lead to a defeat with an opposition with Saturn, a no, you know what I mean? With like a, hey, this isn't going to happen because you popped off and were an asshole, like, right? So just be careful.
There's a good question in the chat here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Field. A technical question: how do you look at Mars being in Taurus, exiled, fixed Earth? Could that lead to some force being held back, and Saturn in domicile, retrograde? Okay. What do you say, Spencer?
So so thank you. That's Place of Stillness, aka Manuela. And I would all encourage you to go check out Manuela's new astrology channel. She's a student of mine as well, and I think she's going to do some great things. So we'll probably have her on the show at some point too. But cool. Manuela, I think that Mars in Taurus is in its exile. It is a place where it disrupts the things that bring us security, the routines that we have, especially second decan Taurus, is the things that we do consistently to create growth. Like watering the plants just enough each day, like showing up for our work each day. I have the moon in this decan, so I have the moon conjoining the midheaven in Cancer too. And the secret to my success is I show up, I do the work that's necessary for that day, and I'm consistent, and I keep showing up, and I keep showing up, and I keep showing up,
Taurus too. You said
exactly.
Cancer too.
Oh, I did. Sorry. Yeah, thank you for catching that.
I think we all knew what you were talking about.
Taurus too, right? My moon's in the second decan of Taurus. Thank you. Sometimes I do this when I'm solo and I listen back and I'm like, oh shit, I just
we all know what's happening.
Yeah. So when Mars is here though, Mars disrupts those routines and says, look, the way that you've always done it, maybe even the rut that you've gotten into maybe is stale and has to be shaken up. There's something in your environment that is not allowing you to feel that sense of security that you've always relied upon. So part of the conversations we might be having is, how do we change our routines? How do we change what we look to security, but also have that be a reflection of our authentic selves? When Mercury is moving through that second decan of Leo, that is the victory that they talk about in 36 Faces, is the victory of authenticity, of saying, this is who I am, and this is the real me. And it's the victory of being the same as you are externally as you feel inside. So we may be having some arguments about, hey, you're trying to be the real you, but that's shaking up my expectations of who you are, and what brought me security is my projection potentially of what you used to be, right? That could be part of the argument. That's part of my personal argument right now. And I know I'm having to own that. And then when we get to the opposition with Saturn in the third decan of Aquarius is really about, are you going to learn from the past, but for the specific purpose of moving on? That decan has a daimon called Osiris, and Osiris collected, the pieces of Osiris were collected by Isis after he was split up. And she reconstructed him just long enough to get it on and give birth to Horus, the new king. And then Osiris went into the underworld and went off into the unknown and became the lord of the underworld. So we have to kind of think about what is worth defending when Mercury moves into opposition, and what is worth letting go and saying, you know what is plan B? I think it's going to be important to have a plan B with Saturn retrograde in the third decan of Aquarius, where we have to say, this is just time to let this go. And I had this experience in my family, Janet, where I had a certain expectation of what my daughter should be doing during the summer, like work-wise and things like that. Like, you've been sitting around long enough. It's time for you to get a job. And in her defense, she did try, and there were a lot of obstacles to that. And eventually we had to come to an agreement about it where I had to let it go. I had to let go of my expectations of what I had, my visions of her summer was going to look like. And we had to make a compromise. So that's kind of the, part of the tension. I'm just telling you how I'm living it, because I got here's what a Leo will do, or a Taurus moon, which I've got both of those things, is, well, I said it, so that's what's going to happen. You can get into a lot of really like bad situations if you get entrenched in that position. Right?
Yeah, that's the fixed sign focus too, right? Like that, the entrenched is a really good word for that. And Saturn and Aquarius too, retrograde, like going back over it. I'm experiencing this in some interesting ways too, because I'm in the Saturn is opposing my sun. It's like moving back to oppose my sun. And I'm also going through my opening Saturn square, post Saturn return. And that's really close to exact right now too. And so right now I'm not doing anything. I can't make any forward progress no matter how hard I try. And so I'm just trying to be patient and, weather the storm until the skies are a little bit better for like putting out projects and stuff.
Yeah, you're tapping into your camel energy, right?
Yeah.
And having gone through the Saturn Sun opposition a few years ago, it's tough. It is a time where you feel a lot of frustration. You feel a lot of depression because things aren't working out exactly the way that you had envisioned. There's a lot of compromise that comes into play. I guess what I will say is that it does pass, and then the next set of challenges arise. Yes. But I like what you're saying about like acceptance. Okay, like, as I was trying to work through my own familial interpersonal challenges, I did a lot of I-Ching divination. And the I-Ching basically was Saturn's voice saying, you may just have to let this one go. If it isn't going to work out the way that you envisioned it, you just have to let that position go. And once I did that, peace began to be restored. And do you see what I'm saying? And so I think if we want to restore peace during these times, we can't get too fixated on our position because of what our idealism is around. Remember, Leo is the sun. It is idealistic. It's saying this is how it should be, right? And if we get too attached to that and we lose sight of the reality, Taurus too, is also, I think, the material reality of the physical reality of what's happening. And then the idealistic reality check of Saturn in the air sign there, of saying, well, maybe this is what's good for the group and not just your own personal vision, right? And this is, I think, what we're going through, Janet, as a collective right now. What is good for the whole? What is good for the planet rather than what is good for a couple individuals, right? With climate change. And I think we're going to see a lot of conversations in the collective about that moving forward, because I don't know how much louder the planet has to speak for us to get the message. And I don't know. I'm not usually one that gets overly political on this channel, or I try not to fearmonger as well, but I do think that we're at a really important inflection point where action needs to happen immediately if we don't want a super bad outcome for the planet. So I'm going to keep saying that until people get it. And maybe it's not just my job. We have to do it together, don't we?
We sure do.
Okay. Janet, we've got this malefic enclosure that ends roughly Friday or Saturday, depending on whether you consider the moon being able to break it up. So for all of you who are having some mercurial challenges, look to the first of all the Leo area of your chart, but also the Virgo and the Gemini area of your chart for topics in your life that may feel like they're at a standstill, where you're just kind of stuck, and recognize that if you can hang on until the weekend, after the weekend, until this Mars business passes too, you probably have a much better outcome. And you don't have to have it all figured out all at once, right? You can kind of live into the answer when you say.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's one of my guiding principles in life. It will be revealed.
Yeah.
I had a colleague throughout the whole pandemic. She's she was really close to retirement, getting on 70 years old, and she would always say that, we don't know right now, but it will be revealed.
Yeah, you and I were talking about that pre-show. It's okay to say you don't know something, Mm-hmm. I think that we in this industry, I hate that word for it, but in this area of life, a lot of times people are looking to us for answers and for relief. And sometimes we have to acknowledge that we're just human beings living this stuff right along with all of you, and that it's okay not to know everything. So it's so multivalent that we may have an expertise in one area, but then maybe something else where it's like, I have no idea. Right?
Another good thing that ties into that's very mercurial is curiosity. So when we have Mercury making all of these contacts in between, like quite intense, like world changing astrology, be curious about what it is that comes up. Like pay attention to the omen. Like let yourself feel into that, and like get a little bit curious and imaginative.
I love that. And that's really my go-to with Mercury too, or Hermes, is asking a question, right? Just getting like you said, not having to feel like you know the answer in that Jupiterian way. That's kind of some of the negative qualities of Jupiter potentially, or Zeus, is this feeling of righteousness and feeling like you have to know the answer all the time. This is my lovely daughter has a Sagittarius moon, and ever since she was 4 or 5 years old, it was very difficult for her to admit that she didn't know something. And I've had to tell her, it's okay that you don't know. You're just learning. It doesn't mean you're a bad person or anything. Like you can ask a question, so. Janet, let's move this chart a little bit here. So we've got the opposition of Mercury and Saturn that perfects around the 30th or the 31st. So keep that in mind, friends. And then as we get to the first, there's our Mars Uranus North Node stack up. Okay. Probably one of the biggest things that astrologers have been looking at for 2022. And that is going to lead us into a square between Mars and Saturn. Okay. An applying square. So any other final thoughts with that Mars Uranus North Node experience?
Oh, yeah. It just looks like heat and pain to me, but
right.
that's just because it's really, really hot here right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's just a wait and see sort of situation with Uranus in the mix. We literally cannot predict. Whatever we predict, Uranus will be like, sorry, I'm unpredictable.
I've always found that as an astrologer, that even with this lens into potentially knowing some of the themes that it could represent, I'm still surprised when Uranus contacts happen. So that's just kind of the nature of that planet, I think.
Expect the unexpected.
Yes. And slow down, I think, is another thing that I would highly recommend. Is a great way to not make an outcome worse is to, if a crisis happens, you can make it worse by panicking and adding to the chaos. If something crazy happens, collect yourself first, and you'll be able to take an action that is much more in alignment with an efficient action that could be recentering rather than add to the problem. So I think that's my thought on that. When we get to here, we have the first quarter moon. Scorpio moon. So the moon in
Spicy.
exile, spicy. It's going to be
Look at
posing.
that square. Everything is so square. We're getting a
Everything's
little
square.
relief from Mercury and
Yeah.
Jupiter, but not a lot.
Yeah. We've got a big grand cross between the moon, the sun, Mars, and Saturn around that period of time. But like you were saying, we have a really strong Mercury. So again, a great time to like reskill, to ask questions, to try to become efficient within your life. Maybe that can break up some of the stalemate between all of these planets right now. Um, that second decan of Scorpio, the South Node's hanging out there. And to me, that decan, we've got Six of Cups, which is a nostalgic card. We've talked about, like, I believe Susan Chang calls it the setting sun, the afterglow, the golden hour. To me, that moon South Node thing is more about uh, releasing codependent relationships, right? Like reducing our codependence, and because both Austin Coppock and Susan Chang talk about intermeshed mutual distillation. If we're talking about making beer, we're distilling things together into something. So we may be required to reduce our dependence on people that were a big part of our life, and that can be painful. It can be sad. We can long for the past, but I think that when we come to acceptance with that, you can think about the composting, where it creates for future fertility, right? Like, are you a composter on the farm as well?
Oh yeah, I have seen some epic compost pits. The cool thing about compost is it's got to be hot.
Yeah,
It
right.
really does. Like if you've got a really, really great like living compost, it's huge and it's stinky. Actually, it's not as stinky as you think, because the heat is down in the core. You've got to keep it hot and you've got to keep it wet, and then you can dig a hole and throw anything in there and it'll disappear.
Oh, beautiful.
That composting, the concept of composting is such a rich, like, Scorpio moon, South Node.
It's so martial too, right? Like the heating up of the soil underground, and the hidden heat, right? Like the nocturnal heat under the ground. I love it. So a great time at this first quarter to compost your expectations so that you can start to be your authentic self individually. You may have to start separating a little bit. Again, I'll bring it back to my personal case. I'm like, I got to get my daughter a bank account and all these things, and like, I'll get her set up in her dorm and all these things. And I'm going to need all your support out there, community people. A Cancerian father with the daughter leaving the nest is not an easy experience. So yes. All right. So that's our first quarter moon. And then just a couple other things just to wrap up here. Then the next 2 days at that quarter moon, we're going to see the Mars applying to the square with Saturn in the third decan of Taurus and the third decan of Aquarius. And I talked about, I don't know, Jan, if you got through the 3 hours I did on August yet. That's epic.
I did actually. Yeah, I think I was there.
Well, there you go. So I talked a little bit about the last time these two planets squared off in these specific decans. And that was in the mid-30s when we had the Dust Bowl era, where the huge droughts that were happening, where 650 million tons of topsoil were removed from the Great Plains of North America, and these huge dust storms that moved thousands of miles east and blocked out the Statue of Liberty. I thought that was pretty epic. I think we could be seeing more things like that. Just drought in general from all this heat. Anything else you can think about with the combination of these two planets coming together?
Oh, just the big flashing no sign, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a little bit more Mercury, Saturn, but the other thing I was thinking about for me and how this is hitting my chart is like running into a brick wall.
Yeah.
And like the imprint of your body in the brick wall. There's something very like visceral about these two heading off. It's very upsetting, you know. I mean, it could be a breakthrough, but there's Saturn is so strong in
Well,
that
it's
position.
probably one of the most difficult traditional aspects in all of astrology. The two malefics squaring off or opposing one another, right? So, uh, yeah, not necessarily a fun time. I will point out that Saturn is in the overcoming position. Saturn is also stronger by its sign placement, although it is retrograde, so there's challenges around that. It's weakened by that retrograde motion. But I do think leaning into the Saturnian, what Saturn is asking, could alleviate some of that martial frustration. Mars in that decan wants to, what would I think about that? That decan reminds me of like, it's repentance, right? It's saying, how do we fix the mistakes that we've made in the past through doing something too rashly? And you may really want to take action on fixing what's happened in the past, but you may have to slow down and think about the ramifications of what is happening for the collective.
Yeah. For me, that brings up like a lot of the cards we were talking about, because you've got, it's like Mars is challenging Saturn, but from like a weaker position, which is, you know, also speaks to that third decan of Leo. But you have to have commitment and follow through to face this challenge. Like that's the Saturnian part. That's, you have to believe in your ability to continue and to just keep forging ahead, and to overcome the challenge. That's harder than it sounds, but it can just be simple actions. That's what commitment is. It's making the choice every day to do the thing, like you were saying with the second decan of Taurus.
Well, and truly learning from the past too. I think that's what the vibe I get from third decan of Aquarius is, like Osiris, you know, in that card where we see someone collecting the swords and leaving a few behind. There's some things you can't take with you, but there's wisdom that you can take with you. If you don't learn from the past, you're doomed to repeat it, right? So it's a great time to like really examine what you've done in the past and what worked, what didn't. Be willing to let go those old systems, those old personas that aren't serving you anymore. And, you know, it may take a little while to establish what is new, but I think that that's part of being human. And I see we've got some great comments here. We've got Carol talking about the body heats up during transformation, like belief changes, etc. And menopause. Yeah, I've got it. I'm having some experiences with menopause too. I won't be too specific about that. I'm not going through it myself, but I have some people in my life that are experiencing that, and I'm going through the teenage, adolescence, and menopause simultaneously in my life, and it's kind of similar on some level, but different. And Tarya says, I have the sun at 24 degrees of Aquarius, so I have had Saturn transiting there a long time. Pluto at 16 degrees and 17 degrees Leo opposing Jupiter in Aquarius, new moon and opposing. Wow, you've got a lot going on there, Tarya.
Yeah.
So, and then Mortal and Wild is saying Saturn opposing Sun, coming back over Saturn return too. Very upsetting, depressing, feeling useless, and the futility in everything. Well, Carol, I hope that you realize that you have a lot to contribute to the world. And I follow your social medias, and I think that you're a very talented video maker. And I think that you have a lot to offer the world. So I hope that, you know, through the changes that you're going through are temporary, and that you're able to find some of that Leo light, and recognize too that part of I think some of the Saturn Sun opposition and the challenges between Aquarius and Leo is that I think that a Leo needs to feel appreciated and needs the audience sometimes. And the challenge with Saturn and Aquarius and that is that sometimes we have to do what is quote unquote the right thing, whether we get approval or not, or whether we get the applause or not. And that can feel really starving for the Leo folks in our life, as being starved of that applause and that attention. But I think the lesson is giving that approval and applause to yourself. And this is part of what, you know, Jan and I are wearing Regulus oil today, right? we're big fans of Spear and Sundry's Regulus materia. And part of that materia is all about uh, being yourself and not needing the approval of others, which, funnily enough, actually activates the approval of others. When you find you're like, fuck it, I don't give a shit what you think about me. I'm just going to do me. I'm going to do this because this is what I believe. You can take it or leave it. Then people are like, wow, that person doesn't care what I think. Wow, they're pretty cool. Like they're no longer I can't control them. I wish I could be like that. I wish I could, not care what people think. That person's cool. So it's really funny how the paradox works with that. And yeah, I think that maybe we're going through a collective menopause of some level, right, Carol? Like where we're going through a change. Like I haven't really thought of it like that. And again, I'm not going through that personally in my body, but I have some people I care about that I've witnessed going through the process and talking a lot about it with them. So yeah, what do you think? Maybe here, I'm going to toss this back to someone who may have some more insight into this. And I'm not saying that you're going through menopause or anything, but what do you think about maybe menopause as a symbolic thing for the collective?
Yeah, I think that's interesting that came up, because, right, the power of the crone,
Right.
on the other side of menopause, you lose the fertility aspect, but it's the wisdom beyond, right? And from people I know who have gone through it themselves, they feel that they experience a lot more forward movement. They feel that way that you were just describing, Leo, the Regulus oil effect, like when you don't give a fuck what other people think you're doing because you're not seen as like a productive fertility farm for society, then you can do whatever the hell you want.
It's freedom.
Yeah, that idea of like wisdom and forward movement, it could be a nice kernel of hope for what it is that we do on the other side of a really difficult time in terms of like societal change and climate change.
Yeah. And it's so tough because in the media in the past, we've upheld this vision of what it means to be a woman and what it means to like contribute to society. We've glamorized youth in this capitalist culture on some level as well. I'll offer this. This is coming from my Virgo 3 placements. When we talk about the crone phase of life and where we have wisdom to offer, I think it's more about, not more about, in addition to, not trying to mansplain any of this, I hope, because this is, I want to be careful with my words. We're getting to the Mars Mercury square, right? But I think I would think of it as, what can I pass on to the future generations? And what can I consolidate into a consumable, not consumable, but a transferable wisdom. Like, and it could be material art. It could be knowledge. I know that for me, I feel an intense need to pass on ancient wisdom and preserve it against the ravages of time. So I think that the relationship I've had with the elders in my life, a lot of, I guess you could call crone women, like my grandparents, my great aunts. I spent many hours with my 106-year-old great grandma recording. I have about 9 hours of tape recorded conversations with her, preserving family history. Right. So that was so important to me, to be able to say, I don't want to forget this stuff. So even if you're feeling like you're not getting the respect that is due to you, there's something that is important for you to pass on to the next generation. Yeah. And really, you may not get to see the results of that, but it is so important. And that brings us back to the issues of climate change. You may have to give up, if you are a corporate billionaire, some money in the short term, but what you're passing on is a legacy for your grandchildren. This is what I can't understand about some of these folks. Do they not have grandchildren? Do they not care about the next 7 generations like the indigenous cultures teach us, right? Yeah. So delayed gratification living with less in the short term to be able to preserve things for future generations, I think is something that we can lean into with that, right?
You're getting a lot of resonance in the chat here.
Yeah, what do we got?
We've got some wise people telling us that they like what you're saying.
Yeah, Devin's pointing out Mars is on Algol during this period of time.
I was like, that's going to take us in a place where we might not be able to recover a happy feeling by the end of this.
Boy, well, we get when we get to the full moon on the 11th that Portia and I are going to talk about, we have Mars on Algol. Yeah, so we have to be really careful that we don't lose our heads. And Algol is reflective of feminine power too. So leaning into that feminine strength potentially. I'm looking through these comments here because I love including our community here in these talks. Carol says menopause is a brilliant time for processing all your stuff. Yeah, for that fermentation process. That's the heat, right? We bring in the composting heat of menopause potentially. Kate is another Leo rising, Aquarius sun here. Making sure to join lives for proof of life. That's funny. And I hope that this is an oasis for some of you. We've had various friends stop in the chat that have really been struggling. And I hope that just you being seen and your struggles being seen brings you some peace of mind, and that knowing that we're going through this together can help get you through to the other side. I hope that that's something that we provide for you here.
Yeah, I think you do a great job of that. Sometimes I watch these after the fact, after the lives happen, and I still find myself crying when you talk to people in the chat where you're like, we see you, you're going to be fine. I think that's what's super valuable about this is that everyone's going through it. Like these are really, really difficult transits, and most people are going to have at least one fixed placement. So we're all getting dinged, and the world is getting dinged, and we're all going through it. So there's something about being able to provide this space where people can feel like they can be heard and
absolutely
see what other people are going through too.
Well, and this is why I started to change formats away from just doing a million videos each week to doing these specific, more longer form lives, so we could just hold space for people. I mean, it's so valuable to me too. This is, over the course of the pandemic, I've been pretty isolated, and this is like social time for me. This is the communal gathering where we come together in space and exchange ideas and just talk with one another. And the guests that I have are just people that I think are interesting. So I'm just really so grateful that you're willing to spend this time with me today here too, Janet. It's
great.
Yeah, I just feel like
I agree with Prudence. You are a lighthouse.
Oh, thank you, Prudence. That really fills my cancer second decan Cancer walled garden heart. That little oasis. Thank you so much. So Carol said she is a Regulus sun. It's flipping machines that give you hell. Oh yeah, so dealing with the technology. Devin's talking about Zaruk, more specifically overcoming melancholy. Is that another fixed star that's in that area potentially? That's one that's a little new to me. Kate is moving furniture very carefully while you're listening. Okay, be careful, be careful. We've got, let's see, post-menopause, a lot like Regulus oil. There you go, good. Lynn is talking to us about navigating the crone phase with grace. Second Saturn return definitely activates legacy concerns. Yes. Kate is saying that crone has a bad rap. What is the masculine equivalent? Oh boy, I have to think about that for a second. It's tough because we live in we still unfortunately live in a little bit of a patriarchy, I guess, when you say, like, we still haven't quite gotten.
It's not a little bit, Spencer.
All right, so we live in a patriarchal society. All right, I just was trying to, ease into it here. So I think one of the greatest challenges, especially with men and women, is that a lot of times society right now increases the value of a man as he ages, and it's harder for women, I think, to feel the same value as they move forward into the crone phase, because we've exalted the body and how people look and what they can contribute, like through fertility and things like that. So I think the male equivalent, it's tough to say because it's not exactly a one-to-one type of thing. I will say, just from my personal experience, I am noticing my body change as I move into my 40s. Like my hair is starting to recede just a little bit. There's little mysterious aches and pains here and there that you're like, should I get this checked out? Or I don't know what's going on here. Like, but so there definitely is a loss of, I think, energy where I think for me, I have had to learn to pace myself as I've gotten a little bit further into middle age. I don't necessarily have the unlimited amount of energy that I would have had in the past, where I need to learn to rest every once in a while. Like Janet was saying, I was a very energetic youth, and the way that I dealt with like when I competed in sports, I just went crazy. Like that's how I quote unquote won, was I would just try harder than everyone else for an extended period of time. I wasn't necessarily the most talented, but I was definitely the most like committed, you know. And now I can't do that anymore. I can't have this crazy explosion of energy without balancing it with rest, for my mental health and things of that as well. Like I have to take rest mentally also. So I think that's what I would say is the masculine equivalent, is learning how to utilize your energy more efficiently without having to have these huge bursts, instead of like meeting it out at a pace, right? What do you think about that?
I also am just like Saturn. Why not?
Yeah.
Why can't Saturn be androgynous too? Saturn is so crone energy.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Grandmother Saturn.
There is some sorry, I didn't interrupt. This will be quick. There are some Hellenistic things that talk about Saturn as being a feminine planet. So I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, well, and I'm just thinking about how we get towards the end of Leo season this year. We're going to have the Sun-Saturn opposition, which is very much like, right, tempering that vitality with the, the feeling of slowing down.
Guess who's
that's in my solar return.
Guess whose ascendant this is exactly over.
Yes.
Hi. 21 degrees Leo ascendant here. That should be fun. Yeah. Pray for me. This is literally a week before my daughter leaves for college. So this is and it's exactly
feeling it.
Yeah, I'll be feeling it. It's exactly square my Uranus in the 4th house. So there will be lots of feels around that. Okay, I'm looking at the chat here. Thank you so much, everyone, for your chats. One other favor you can do, folks, if you're out there, hit the like button to get our messaging out to the most amount of people possible. If you're new here, please subscribe to the channel. If you do want to make a material donation to the work we're doing, you can do a little super chat or super sticker. After the fact, there's a little heart on the video called a super thanks. You can also donate to buymeacoffee.com, or you can buy Janet's materials at goodsigil.com. Is that right? There you go.
Got it.
Okay. Purchase her tarot jewelry. It's really awesome stuff. Okay, any other comments we're seeing in here? We've got a lot of grandfather archetypal energy.
Prudence. I was not expecting to get into the crone path this conversation, but I love that we went there.
Yeah. It's a nice balance point to the Leo energy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's cool.
Prudence says Demetra George's book Mysteries of the Dark Moon is a nice reflection on the dark moon crone phase. That's another one I've got sitting on my shelf that I need to engage with. I love Demetra's work. Raven says old curmudgeon phase. I've become a little bit of a hermit in my as I've been aging. Let's see. I think it's more to do with acknowledging women's voices. Therefore, the wisdom might be received from crone time. Women's voices are still not valued. I agree, Carol. It's something we still definitely need to fight for, especially with the reproductive rights issues that we've have here in America, and how we seem to be a few people in power seem to be trying to turn the clock back to breeder culture kind of thing, and not valuing women in the way that they should be valued outside of their contribution to fertility. So crazy times. I don't know. It is something worth fighting for sure. Raven says Venus, maiden moon, mother Saturn, crone. Yes. Gosh, such great comments. You all are so smart and so intelligent, and the light of the sun is shining through this chat here today. And it's I'm just so blessed to have all of you here today, spending your day with me. I just
Yeah, it's really cool. This is a super fun experience.
Isn't it neat?
As a prior chat dweller, this is great.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. If y'all are active in the chat, maybe one day I'll just be like, I really love that person's thoughts. I should invite them on the show and give them some FaceTime. And I just love promoting other intelligent voices in this field too. So this is part of, I think, how I try to maintain a balance, and my own personal modesty is uplifting the voices of others as well, and not having it be all about me. Maybe that's my Aquarius South node speaking and saying, hey, you're all in this, we're all equal, we're all in it together type of thing. Oh yeah, we got another person reading the mysteries of the dark moon. Okay, I'll have to engage with that. All right, Janet, should we wrap this one up and put a bow on it with some of the divination?
Yeah, I love the camel. Let's talk about the camel. Devin earlier in the chat mentioned that the camel is in the Thoth High Priestess. So
cool.
Right down here.
There's the camel. Yeah.
Which is a nice little tie-in.
Neat. So how was there any literature in the Thoth book about what the camel represents within that High Priestess?
I can fish it out.
Yeah, let's see.
If you want to talk about the camel, I'll find what it is, and then I'll read it out.
I'll give you some camel facts while Janet is bringing that up. So I'm going to read to you a post that my lovely partner Tanya did when she was when we pulled the camel on a different time a few years ago. So Tanya says, and this was during some really difficult astrology as well, here are some of the greatest hits from the camel to get you through this eclipse. There was an eclipse that was happening. So we're not having an eclipse here, folks, but the same thing applies for all the challenging aspects. So camels are survivors. They have adapted to very harsh conditions. Tanya says they have a thick layer of skin on their feet and stomach that allows them to lie down and sleep on the sand that is so hot it would injure other types of animals. So we're bringing in that heat quality, right? They can eat thorns because they have tough leathery skin inside their lips and their mouths. So we can eat stuff that would normally hurt us, right? We can consume all the bullshit and try to survive on stuff that wouldn't normally be nutritious, but we'll figure it out. They have double layers of eyelashes and can close their nostrils to block out sand. Okay, so maybe talking about healthy boundaries around this period of time, right? They have humps on their back that are not water, but fat stores that they can break down for calories and hydration when there's no food or water. So they're carrying their nutrition with them. They have an oval-shaped blood cell that can withstand levels of dehydration that would kill other creatures. Basically, they're hyper-adapted to some of the most inhospitable climates on Earth, and they can live 50 years. When they do find water, they can drink over 50 gallons in 3 minutes, which also would kill other types of animals, but their blood cells and tissues can withstand extreme fluctuations in hydration levels. Their body temperatures can also range from 93 to 104 degrees with no ill effects to their body.
Incredible.
So they are extremely adaptable. They're tough sons of bitches, right? They really can they can withstand almost anything. I think this speaks to when you do have something like water nourishment, drink it in, appreciate the good things in life, get while the good's good. Like for me, that speaks to me like as a parent, and I'll bring this back full circle. Enjoy the last month you have with your kid. Make it a nice experience, like with her in the house. You don't have to fight about stuff that, there'll be time for figuring some of that other junk out. Just, enjoy this time, this oasis, right? So if you've got some nice experiences in your life, just have gratitude for it. You don't have to figure everything out right overnight. What are some reflections that the camel is bringing to you with some of those camel facts?
Well, right now we have a beautiful Moon Venus conjunction occurring. So soak that up and let that be your fat store for passing through the needle. I love how all of these things sort of like came together through the chat, but This is my main reference book for the Thoth, which is cool. It's
I need to get that.
Akron and Hajo Banzaf.
Can you put that in the chat at some
Sure,
point?
yeah.
Because that's not one that I have.
And about the camel in that card, the High Priestess, which is the moon card. So currently we're having a Cancer moon situation. The camel, which carries its own water supplies through the desert, is thereby the connective member between the inner spheres, water, soul, and the world of real forms, earth, matter. It is a symbol of moderation, sobriety, and modesty, which, because of its arrogant physiognomy, has also been misinterpreted as an expression of presumption and obstinacy. The same applies to the High Priestess. Wow. I love that.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, yeah. One other book that I have that talks about this symbol is called Animal Frequency by Melissa Alvarez. And she adds a couple things. She says, reserve your energy, be of service, adapt to the heat in your life, the harsh climates, eat anything you can eat when the food is scarce. You don't have to have like for example, if you're going through inflation, if you're used to eating really crazy expensive stuff, maybe you have to compromise a little bit. Like, we shouldn't necessarily have to, but when you're trying to survive, you gotta feed yourself first and then figure out how to change the system next. Self-empowerment. You've got everything that you need inside of you. Carry your own burdens. So it talks about heavy burdens, and that really reflects the Saturn-Mars thing we were talking about. Boost your stores and reserves at this time, because you may find that there comes a time of really harshness where you're not going to be able to find food or resources as easily as you were in the past. But don't give away too much of your energy to others. Conserve it. Slow down, adapt, and utilize your survival instincts. A lot of times we try to, give more than we are capable of, and that can also be toxic to ourselves as well. That can really be challenging. So those are some great camel reflections, I think. We got any other? Carol says, camel carries the allegory, all the fragments of the story. There's a river cam here in Avalon flowing to the Queen Camel Village. Oh, interesting. Okay, very cool. All right, so that's a camel. Just hunker down. Right?
Store up the good times.
There you go. There you go. I love that. And thank you, Lynn, for the super sticker. I appreciate your contribution today. I really appreciate that. Store up the good times. I love that. I love that. Gratitude is always a great answer for a lot of questions that we had in our life, isn't it? Appreciation. Yeah, I've got this card staring me in the face right now.
Yeah.
Three of Cups.
Loving that card.
Yeah. So we've got one more divinatory system for you today, and that's the I-Ching. And we got the hexagram number 36, which I think is, it was pretty darn appropriate when we were talking about the challenging solar aspects that are going on right now. 36 translates to darkening of the light, an eclipse, hiding one's light, brilliance injured, censorship, keeping a low profile, hiding your feelings. I feel like this hexagram really reflects Saturn in Leo, that is related to that first decan of Leo, like where it maybe we feel like our light is repressed a little bit, but we have to figure out how to work within these times that are a little bit challenging. I'm going to tell you a story, Janet, about 36 real quick. You have a few more minutes?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So this is a story from various forms of the I-Ching, various translations, and they talk about the last days of the Shang dynasty in China when it was falling into corruption. And we had a prince, his name was Prince Ji, or J-I, I think that's how you pronounce it, who was one of the last remaining virtuous persons on the court. And I think his uncle or someone who had taken over was getting all crazy with drunken madness, maybe some of the Dionysian donkey revelry, that we were talking about. But the rulers were so drunk that they didn't even know what day it was. And they sent out some heralds to speak to Prince Ji, and basically were like, hey, do you know what day it is? And if he had said that he had known what day it was, it would have put him in a lot of danger, because if he wasn't like conforming, quote unquote, to the craziness, they probably would have killed him. That doesn't mean that he cooperated with them, though. So what he did is he feigned drunkenness and madness to be able to preserve his integrity. So I think I thought that story was really cool, because I think that we're hiding our light for survival sometimes here. We may be heading into times where it may be dangerous to completely express your opinion, your authenticity in certain situations where it could become dangerous. That doesn't mean that you are letting go of your values. That doesn't mean that you are not going to be able to be your true self in the future. It just means it's like, hey, there may be somebody crazy around that you need to kind of like not engage with in the time being, but also not help them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And I definitely feel like there are some dangerous situations that are starting to crop up politically, which is unfortunate, because I feel like we've made a lot of progress as far as being able to express ourselves more genuinely, but there seems to be a pushback on that from various corners of belief systems that is frightening, I will say, on some level. And I hope that all of you out there who may be living on the fringe of society or are trying to integrate and become more equal voices are staying safe, and that you're able to be your authentic self within this rise of authoritarianism. I hate to use the word, but fascism and late stage capitalism, where and white supremacy. Let's just be totally real about it, where some of those forces are starting to gain more notoriety and power. And I worry about some of my friends in various parts of the world and with various different ways of living. It's a difficult time right now for women too, like, right? I mean, an historically oppressed group as well. So do you have any thoughts on that, Janet?
Well, what you're speaking to right now ties back into the Five of Wands, that like thread of service and, of being, confrontational only to the extent where it's safe, in order to like protect yourself and those you love and your communities. Right. Kate in the chat saying hiding light to survive strikes a chord. Yeah. And I think that was really interesting, you telling that story about G and the drunkenness, because we've got a couple different threads, like Sekhmet getting drunk on like the blood colored beer. Yeah. And so there's definitely like also the camel being a symbol of sobriety. There's definitely like a keep your wits about you and be smart, and like allow others to get drunk on their power while you sort of like slide under the radar to stay safe. I don't know. That's what I'm getting from all of that stuff coming together. I agree. Yeah, and Raven's mentioning there's been a very worrisome rise in homophobia and transphobia. That's very scary. I agree, Raven. That is scary. There has definitely been pushback from extreme conservative forces in all parts of the world right now, and it is becoming a little bit unsafe for people of alternative lifestyles to be themselves, and it's sad. It makes me really sad. It just hurts, that people aren't allowed to be who they want to be. Well, I think that you're doing it right, because you're using your bodily privilege to talk about these things and to bring those issues to more people, because I think that's what's necessary, is that folks who do have certain privileges need to speak out, like right. Trans women are women, right? Like disabled people deserve to live a life. We can wear masks. Simple things, right? Like if you can take a stand, that's the Five of Wands, right? Well, and that's something we've been trying to do more of here on this channel, is part of becoming a Leo Regulus-ish type thing is not caring as much if you offend someone who is perpetuating evil. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there was a time in the past where my Midwestern white sensibility was like,
we don't rock the boat. We need to like, be take the middle path and everything. And that's part of the problem we're having in leadership in America right now, is that there's this, people don't want to rock the boat, where that's not going to work anymore. Sorry, you have to take a stand for the good of the planet, for the good of these underserved communities. It's just, you can't do half measures anymore. It just isn't going to work. Yeah. So I hope that is making my audience feel safe and supported here. If you don't resonate with those things and this isn't for you, sorry. Like, we're going to try to continue to promote equality and fairness and love on this channel. So again, I think that I'll try to amplify those voices as much as I can, and I try to bring as much diversity onto this channel and amplify those voices as well. So I hope that you all feel that out there, and I hope that we've created that safe space here for all of you. So back to this I-Ching. There's two changing lines. The first changing line says, darkening of the light during flight. He lowers his wings. The superior person does not eat for 3 days on his travels. There is somewhere to go. The host gossips. Okay, so the notes I have for this say, facing great obstacles now, which obviously we've been talking about for 2 hours, how challenging this space weather is. And you can't surmount the current difficulties all at once. Attempts will meet with hostility and opposition. It's important to withdraw from situations to move on. Fold your wings, right? There's wisdom in knowing when to fight and when to just back off. And sometimes time will solve the problem for you rather than making this big show of strength. I think that's what we see here too. Sometimes just through some humility and saying, you know what, I'm going to back off. Let's have a timeout. Let's go back and like be in our own spaces. And it's okay not to have to figure it out. Sometimes by drawing that hard line in the sand, that's when you create a position that you aren't going to be able to back off of, and you create a destruction of a relationship. And that can be so difficult to heal from when you've made a declarative statement. I'm speaking from experience because I've made plenty of ultimatums in my life as a Leo rising and a Taurus moon, quite frankly, where I was just like, no, but ultimately, I hope that I've been able to wake up in time to be like, okay, I need to back off this position and withdraw. And thank you, Rachel, for the super sticker. I super appreciate you. I think this is a huge thing for Leo season, is knowing when to say when and not get into that fixed position of pride where it's more about like the principle of the thing rather than dealing with the issue at hand. It says, don't compromise principles while you wait for your improvement. Maintain faith in your ultimate goals and don't surrender the values due to temporary setbacks. Ignore the critics and naysayers. Keep going, but safeguard your inner light. Okay? Just a withdrawal does not mean giving up. Like, this is something where in like the art of war or something, there are times when, you need to withdraw the troops, so to speak, to live to fight another day. If you lose the battle, you don't have to lose the war, type of thing, right? Maybe we're in that time in history where some of the forces of evil are on the rise, but eventually this is something where this next line comes into play. It says, not bright, but dark. First he ascends to heaven, then he fell into the earth. So I love this line in the I-Ching because this is so instructive. It says, the darkening of the light has gone as far as it can go. Evil consumes itself eventually if you starve it of the good, right? If you starve evil of something to fight against, eventually it starts to consume itself. I love that, right? Mm-hmm. So bad times coming to an end potentially. Power and resources are misused in the past, but now you can find a new way forward. The seeds of change, hope for the future. Darkness destroys itself and good will prevail again. So that gave me some hope, right?
Yeah.
I found this too. Go ahead.
That's so beautiful. There's so many threads in there that like came up in the chat too. Like the darkening of the light. Like there's just so many little instances of resonance of what we were talking about with the wisdom of the crone. And I just keep thinking about like storing up that value, and the camel passing through the needle is more likely than a rich man getting into heaven, right? So it's like this idea of storing up that value and what is your core value, and letting that be your guiding principle through the hard times, right?
Yeah. Safeguarding that flame, because you don't want to let the flame go out. Even if it's not as bright as it could be, it's you still are the one that is tending to it. And this is something I'll say to you, Carol, just I've talked to you, Carol. Even if that light feels repressed by the Saturn opposition, that you are responsible for tending to that flame, right? And you have to keep it alive through your faith and your hope, even if others aren't feeding into that flame, because flames can be fed by other people's fuel. But ultimately, like, this is something I've learned from studying Hestia too. I pray to Hestia every morning, the keeper of the sacred flame. Sometimes we're the only ones that are going to keep that flame alive. But it's so important that we do, because eventually that flame can turn into something massive. And it doesn't have to be now, it could be in the future. But if you don't keep that flame alight, it will go out, and then there's something, there's no chance for that in the future, right? And I wanted to thank you for the super sticker, Tarya. Appreciate you. I wanted to shout out Rachel here that says, I heard Rick Levine quote the Arabic proverb again recently, trust in Allah and tie your camel. I actually really love that story. And the gist of that story is, and I'll super paraphrase it. There were two people in the desert that were staying in an inn for the night. One of the people was like, hey, we should go tie this camel up, right? And the other person's like, nah, I'll trust in Allah. I'll trust in God to take care of it. And they wake up the next morning and the camels have run out. And the wise person says, well, trust in Allah, but tether your camel, which is a great representation of have faith, pray, but also take the necessary steps to take care of your physical business, right? Like for me, the universe will provide, but it's not just going to bring everything to your doorstep. It could bring you an idea that you have to act upon. It can bring you some kind of, situation that you have to be able to take advantage of, but then you got to do the rest. It's not going to do it for you. So I think that's great advice. So yeah, and Dee is agreeing with some of these things here today. Yeah, and Kate says even 1 degree of light breaks the day. Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful.
Exactly. So this hexagram with these two changing lines is changing to number 52, which is basically the mountain, keeping still, restraint, keeping quiet, attaining inner peace, enduring, which is very camel-like, taking one day at a time. The mountain's a great symbol for this. I don't know if those of you ever study Chinese feng shui, but everybody has like a Kua number. You've heard of Kua numbers, Janet?
Oh, I have not. No.
Yeah, so it's based on your the year that you're born. You have a certain energetic element. Like for me, as a person born in 1980, I believe they do it. It is a let me think. It's the I am the mountain. I'm Kua number 2, which is big earth. Like, so that is some of the energy that I try to lean into as a personality, is being this rock that over the course of time is stable, is able to be consistent. So we have to be like the mountain, and realizing that the mountain will be there. The mountain is going to, weather all these changes over the course of time, and it's going to take time to change it as well. Like mountains change over eons. Sometimes they outlast these temporary, forest fires, climate changes. It's, coming to alignment with our enduring energy. But 52 to me is all about meditation. It's about quieting the mind. It's about letting the thoughts consolidate so that you're not having that monkey mind chattering away today. What do you think?
I love that, because it brings us back to that sort of, we want to keep things going in like a one day at a time nature, but not in an entrenched way, and in a way that is like just keeping the momentum going enough that we can get through a difficult time.
Yeah.
And what you were saying just now, like calming the mind, like a little bit of meditation, even if it's just like a couple minutes of like intentional mind gathering every day is more valuable than, half an hour once a week, right? So it's like this
Absolutely.
consistency, one day at a time, is how we're really going to get through the difficult skies.
Absolutely. And Rachel's asking if all of us 1980s are big Earth. That was why I was stumbling on this. There's something that I'm not exactly sure how to address in that system of divination, where if you were born male or female, you have a different Kua number. So I don't know how to address that in the current way we are approaching gender. But if you are born male, you have big Earth in 1980. If you're born female, biologically female in 1980, you are water. So that is the element that you have. So it changes for gender. And I don't know how we would deal with that with the way that we're moving as a society, but something maybe to think about. I'd be curious if there are people that are practicing that more regularly, how they would approach that as well. So asking questions, right?
Yeah. You don't have to be the expert on everything.
That's right. Yeah. Tell that to my Virgo placement's over. Tell it again.
Spencer, you don't have to be the expert on everything. I promise you.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks, Mama Janet. I love it. All right. Well, Janet, this was so much fun. My goodness.
Yeah, what a great time.
All right. And tell me, before we go, just tell me about your ink here, your beautiful ink that you have.
Oh, yeah. It's the Two of Cups, right?
Yeah.
I don't have the whole snake and staff situation, but I've always wanted to. Yeah, my first tarot, like I got into tarot around the same time as I started getting interested in tattoos. And so that was one of my first tarot tattoos. I have a couple. I have the Chariot
Nice
here. And then I also have an Ace of Swords.
Cool.
And I have a huge Death back piece.
And I love that you wore lion or leopard print today. Big cat energy.
We're allowing ourselves to be seen today.
Yes, absolutely.
The Leo. As a night chart Leo, I'm like, okay, it can happen every now and again.
Yeah, and as a 12th house sun, I'm with you. All right, friends. So many great comments. Raven's asking us to keep Kansas in our thoughts with our votes on abortion rights in the state during this rough astro weather. We're definitely keeping you in our prayers, Raven. Hopefully, we have equal and fair access to reproductive rights for everyone. Rachel says we need to record that for Spencer. It'll be recorded. I'll be able to watch it over again. I'll bookmark it.
We'll have a little clip.
Yeah, I'll timestamp it and be like, oh, there it is. Yeah, clip, exactly. And yeah, Prudence is saying thanks for our time and knowledge today. Thank all of you for your contributions in the chat box today. Super great chat. Always amazed at the wisdom that comes out of there. Thank you, Janet. Again, Janet, we can visit you at your website, which is
www.goodsigil.com. I'll put it in the chat. And I'm Good Sigil on all of my socials.
And while you're doing that, while we're wrapping this up, can you put the name of that Crowley book in the chat too, or a link to
sure.
it? I would like to see that. That's one that I would love to add to my collection. And for those of you who are stopping in today, again, thank you so much for all your comments. Leave us a comment. Please hit the like button to please the algorithmic gods. Subscribe to the channel. Again, I have a Decans of Leo webinar coming up on August the 20th at 1 p.m. on Saturday. That's a great way to dive even further into these Leonine archetypes. We have a good friend from the chat coming and joining us on August 3rd. Portia Bazzani will be joining me on August the 3rd to talk about the full moon in Aquarius 2. So please tune in for that. And again, throughout this time, it's really, I know it's cliche and it's a little sentimental, and but it is important to be kind to yourself during this time. Be kind to one another, but of course, being kind to one another starts with loving yourself, with really like protecting that inner light, whether people are watching or not. You can look in the mirror and say, hey, you know what? I did the best I could today. And even if it wasn't the best I've ever done in the past, it's the best I could do today. And that's good enough for today, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right, friends. That's what I've got for you. Thank you so much, Janet. This was a pleasure. And I will see all of you the next time. Take care, friends. Okay.